Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week, once again, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on? And joining us for our Movie of the Year podcast, replacing Frank from our Game of the Year last week, we have Logan. How you doing, Logan?
Doing fantastic. What's better than talking about movies?
Sometimes games.
That's true.
But yeah, it should be a fun one. Much like the format of last week, we're gonna run through kind of our we've all compiled our top tens and some honorable mentions. So we will kind of take turn person by person going through honorable mentions. Then we'll go through our number 10s, our number 9s, our number 8s, and so on and so forth. Anything 10 through 1 gets assigned points. And by the end of everything, we will have kind of That Nerdy Site collective best movies of 2023 list that we will share out. And much like last week with our Game of the Year, if somebody's like, I've got this thing at my number 10 and other people have it higher on the list, they'll kind of chime in, say, I've got it higher on my list, and we'll kind of kick the conversation down so we don't talk about the same movie three times or risk talking about it three times. As we were talking a little bit before we started recording, just kind of looking back through our 2022 list from last year, our number one movie of last year was Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was, almost universal. Out of a possible 30 points among the three of us, it got 29 points.
Pretty good.
Because it was mine and Logan's number one and Cameron's number two. Glass Onion and RRR were technically tied for number two last year with 24 points. RRR being Cameron's favorite movie of last year. And then we had, continuing down the list, we had The Batman at number 4, which feels like a lifetime ago.
Oh my god, yeah. Oh my god.
The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Great movie.
Black Panther Wakanda Forever at number 6. A three-way tie for number 7 with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Top Gun Maverick, and Nope.
Yeah.
Then Cyrano and Chippendale Rescue Rangers tied for number 10.
Yeah, Chippendale Rescue Rangers was really good.
Yeah,
That's really good, yeah.
it was a fun one.
Better than it had any right to be.
So today we're going to be talking about our favorite movies from 2023. I mentioned up front with these guys, like, I feel like I was not a big movie-going person last year. And there was a time, like, when Cam and I were talking about this, where Cam also was like, I don't think I saw, 10 movies this last year. I was like, well, I'm looking at my list, and you saw many of these with me. So I know you've seen 10. They might not all be great movies, but, we did see at least 10. It's going to be a fun... but like I said, kind of, my list is a very, like, basic list in terms of, like, pretty much everything. I think only one of mine... is not like a wide release kind of movie. Pretty much everything else was like wide release or blockbuster or summer movie kind of stuff. So a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. As I said, we did Game of the Year last week, so feel free to check out that episode if you've not. We've been putting up a number of write-ups on the site, thatnerdysite.com. So we've got like mine and Cameron's individual Game of the Year stuff for 2023. I put up my favorite platinums of 2023 this last week. We have, what else is out there? Like my favorite Lego sets, my favorite That D Plus shows from 2023. I did a list specifically of that since we had a whole bunch of episodes to pull from on that front. And since we're kind of still on hiatus for the holidays from That D Plus show. Go check out all those fun lists, either in podcast or written article form on thatnerdysite.com. I think without further ado, it's gonna be an interesting one because, I know a lot of the things Cameron has seen, given that we are roommates and have seen a lot of these things together. So Logan, I expect, is gonna throw some curveballs into the list here. So I'm trying to think who I want to go with first. I think I'll kind of keep what we did last week, and kind of have like the third man be the kickoff here. So Logan, much like I had Frank kind of kick us off with honorable mentions last week, tell me some of your honorable mention movies for 2023 before we get into our top 10s.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I think 2023 was a eclectic year. I mean, I had the goal of watching as many movies as I did or more in 2022. With the last movie I watched 10 minutes ago, I met that goal. You know, some of the honorable mentions aren't going to be in my top 10. Are going to be stuff like Dial of Destiny, right? Which
is it in your list, Cam?
It is not in my list, no.
Yeah, it's not in mine. So
great.
it sounds like it's an honorable mention for all three of us. Dial of Destiny,
which I think is, we've talked a lot about Dial of Destiny, so that's perfect.
Yeah, there's a whole other podcast, a couple other
Multiple.
podcasts if you want to go listen to those.
I think it's got stuff that's really interesting about it. I think it's got stuff that I really enjoy, and it's an Indiana Jones movie, so I have to give it a shout out. Ultimately, it's actually my second least favorite movie I've seen this year on my current list on Letterboxd, which is more of a testament, I think, to
the quality of stuff you saw.
Yeah, the fun, because even still, I think I think on Letterboxd it's like 3 to 5 stars. Like, it's not bad by any means. I just think that it's got issues, and it's that sort of like playing the expectations game for some of the other stuff that might also be like a 3-star thing, but I had lower expectations, so I enjoyed it more.
Sure.
But I want to give a shout out to that. I want to give a shout out to Haunted Mansion, which is not on my list in my top 10. But again, a lot like the Eddie Murphy one that me and Trevor talked about a couple years ago. Way better than it had any right to be. It's like totally enjoyable and fun, and I had a really good time with that one. Shout out to Danny DeVito always. And then we get to like more like potentially interesting stuff, right? It's like I want to give a shout out to Polite Society, which came out early in the year. And while I don't think it sticks the landing really in what it's trying to do, I think its last act of the movie, last half of the movie, kind of goes into more Get Out territory, but it doesn't work for me in the same way that Get Out did. And I think its first half, which is kind of more like familial strife and like an Indian family in London, works a lot better. But it's still got a lot of charm to it. It's really fun. It's very stylized, which I like a lot. And so I wanted to give that a shout out. No Hard Feelings with Jennifer Lawrence, I thought was good. Okay. There are other people who liked it a lot more than I did. But I enjoyed it. I thought it's like a fine, like, raunchy R-rated rom-com.
Mm-hmm. It definitely, I never ended up seeing it. But it struck me as like that's a kind of movie that isn't made all that often anymore.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think it's totally right. And I think there should be more movies like that. I feel like we talk a lot about the fact that, like, the AA, if you will, movie doesn't really exist anymore. Mm-hmm. This very much fits in that vein. And I love AA movies. And so I'd like more of those things to exist, even if I don't love this one, if only because I think it's largely playing by the beat of every movie like this that's ever been made. Mm-hmm. But there's still something, I think, charming to that, right? Like, if anyone's ever watched any like American Pie movie or like one of the 50 spin-offs of that, right, or something like that, like, it's in that vein. But I think it has a lot of charm too. And I think Jennifer Lawrence like commits 110% to the movie in a really fun way. And I think has a lot of fun being someone who's just sort of really unlikable in the movie. And so in that sense, it's a lot of fun and it's pretty charming. And then the other movie that I want to give a shout out to, or I guess like a movie and a half, is real quick to say like not really anything on it, is Wonka, which is like maybe top 10. But it's someone who's never. Is it in your top 10?
It is in my top 10.
It is in my top 10.
Okay. It's in Cam's too.
Okay.
Yeah. So we will.
Okay. Well, then
we'll discuss it.
I won't say anything else about that. And then the other movie that is probably in both your top 10s that just missed my cutoff is number 11 for me is the Mario movie.
It's in my top 10.
It is not in my. It's my 11 as well. In terms of like. So yeah. And that's what I went back and forth on that one a lot on, because I feel like. Well, we'll get to Mario later on, but it's just one of the movies where I feel like my memories of it are more favorable than I feel like when I left it, if that makes sense. But I feel like I left and be like, that was good. And then I look back and be like, was that a lot more fun than I think it was, kind of thing. But we'll get more into that later on. Yeah. Cool. So any last honorable mentions?
Nope.
We're good.
Those are the big ones I want to talk about.
All right, cool. So yeah, Cam, I'll throw it over to you next for your honorable mentions.
Yeah, so this is probably, I'm going to kind of lump them together, but the Marvel films that came out this year.
Let's see.
Let me just go ahead and double check because I don't believe I have. I'm double checking just in case, but I'm pretty sure I don't have. Yeah, they're not in my top 10 at all.
Because it was Ant-Man and the Wasp, Marvels, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Oh, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I apologize. That is in my top 10.
Okay.
That's
The Marvels,
that's number 12.
the Marvels and Ant-Man and Quantumania, are either of those in your top 10, Trevor?
No.
Okay.
No.
So while I like, especially in theaters, I really like these films. Ant-Man and the Wasp on a rewatch is extremely slow, and like I think spends a lot of time on like unnecessary stuff. But I still think the idea of the attempt of trying to make Ant-Man kind of the spearhead for this next phase and trying to loop in the Kang stuff before all the Jonathan Majors stuff happened this last year. I think was like an ambitious thing to do, considering Ant-Man's often been a more comedic side character in the larger films, and even in his own films play more for action comedy than serious drama. I feel like there was a strong attempt at this. I don't think it worked out, and I think maybe in the long run, with the kind of like the result of Jonathan Majors no longer being part of the MCU going forward, it's for the best. But overall, just like it was a strong attempt to, and like Trevor and I said, it had a lot of like Strange World vibes to it. I think it's also emblematic of Marvel not really knowing or making strong creative choices to give a style or an approach to something, similar to their failures, I think, with Multiverse of Madness. When you compare it to something much more creative, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, with the concept of multiverse, it's also on that kind of same level, like some very like broad range generic stuff for a lot of things.
I mean, for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, so much of the fun of the first Ant-Man movies is like where they play with scale and how they can kind of have fun with that in like an action sequence, going back to like the train sequence in the first Ant-Man movie, or like the little car chase and stuff in the second one. And in this, because they've shrunk everything down to, the nanoverse or whatever it was, the quantumverse, the quantum realm, like everything's at the same level. And so they lose any of that fun. The closest they get is like Giant Man, which is just kind of a slightly larger version of Ant-Man relatively in like the end fight stuff. And it's like, yeah, it just it lost what made the Ant-Man movies fun in favor of making it what every other Marvel thing kind of is. And so it was one of my lowest, like only one movie ranks below it in my list, was Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But it was kind of like in the first viewing, like when we came out and did our spoiler cast afterwards, it was fine, but it really was upon like a rewatch where I was like, oh, this is not a good movie. So yeah,
I enjoyed it because I told you I double timed the film.
Sure.
I watched the film in 2x speed, and so I was like, oh, that was a more enjoyable experience. Because it's just such a
speeding through the whole thing is more enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It is just, and also like the gigantic thing, like when he goes Gigantamax, it works because that's in like the SF Bay.
Sure.
And so like that's once again playing with the scale of things, right? And just totally loses it. On top of that, I feel like what they established in Ant-Man and the Wasp was the dynamic between Scott and Hope. That's like a really fun, charismatic dynamic that they bounce off of each other super well, and that's just lost here because they separate them. Instead of it being like hey, this is what kind of like the Scott, Hope, Cassie family dynamic looks like, which I think would have been a better take on it. They don't follow through with like any of that, like supposedly like they're great actors in this movie and they don't all get to really shine very well. And it's a shame. Moving on to my next shout out, which is the Marvels. The Marvels just was like 12 or 13 on my list, like just didn't make the top 10. I know I'm higher on it than a lot of folks out there, but give me more Miss Marvel, please. I just want more Miss Marvel.
Always. Yep.
She is such a beacon of light in the MCU. I'm okay with it being like the next era of Avengers type stuff. Like, give us young Avengers. Like, normally I would be like, no, I'm good with like what we already have, but no, give me the next era, because every young person they've been introducing to like new Marvel stuff has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it's just fantastic. So just like let these younger actors take over and keep this kind of going. Take a page out of the old, before the New 52 era DC of like creating legacy characters and letting characters grow old and retire and everything. But anyway, that's just it for the Marvels. Next up for my honorable mentions is Tetris. Tetris, I watched.
That did come out this year, didn't it?
Tetris, I was super excited for because I'm a massive Tetris head, and it's okay. Like it's a solid film, but it's also like a.
Got Taron Egerton in it though,
and he's phenomenal in it. I don't think there's like a bad acting in it, but it's very much like they kind of placed it as like this like Cold War era drama of like getting Tetris out of the Soviet hands, and it's really a lot of just like backroom dealing and showing that like the mass corruption in the Soviet era in the 80s, and just like the gross capitalism that was video games in the 1980s as well. Like,
or 2020s.
Yeah, in the 2020s. Basically, it's just like, capitalism is awful, and like the corruption from the Kremlin and everything. Like, it's also like very disjointed in the way that it's like shot. So you have like scene after scene where it basically just goes to like completely other characters for their next story beat, then to the next scene for their like. It's not really well tied together in its editing. It's a very difficult film to edit because it's a lot of closed rooms with just 2 or 3 people in them.
Yeah.
Let's see. After that is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. That's a shout out of mine. I think that it's like we've talked enough about it. In like ad nauseum this year. That T Plus show plus Trevor and I spoiler casting it. Like we've talked enough about it. If you want to know more of my thoughts, watch those podcasts. Like it's good. It's not top 10 good this year. Next up is Haunted Mansion, similar to Logan. I had a really fun time with this. I like, once again, we're getting to like my teens rankings of like where I put movies. Had a blast with this film. Just was a lot of fun. Everybody brought like their A game for just having a fun family film, and it was great because of it.
I do want to say on Haunted Mansion, because I forgot to say it earlier, I like how sad it is
at
a lot of
super
the points in the movie, right? Like I enjoy that, and like Lakeith Stanfield, I think, is just like, he's got real mopey vibes, and I love it. Like he's just sad and bummed out for like 98% of that movie, and it's great.
Well, it matches so well with the kids, and then we find out at the very end, like the kid's dad is dead, and so he's been talking.
I don't think, but yeah, spoilers.
Fair, that's fair. I shouldn't have spoiled it that way. My bad. Should have warned it.
Spoilers for a movie that doesn't even make our top 10.
Nope.
Yeah.
Overall, like, but he matches the kid's vibe, which also matches in a weird way the mom's vibe. The mom is kind of like pulling an inverse to try to like pull people out of the mopiness, and that makes her a draw. Rosario Dawson is awesome in this movie. Like everybody is awesome in this movie. It's just overall, it's not like it's not a high quality caliber film.
Yeah, Haunted Mansion's an honorable mention of mine too, and a lot of my honorable mentions, like I went through my list overall and kind of threw them into like the old. I mean, we haven't done written reviews in quite a while, but like we do have like the rating scale, and like a lot of mine that don't make the top 10 are like in the mediocre and decent range, which is basically like your 5s and your 6s, and Haunted Mansion being one of those. And even though I think it's like a mediocre movie, there are highlights in all of those. Yeah. In the Marvels, like Miss Marvel, very much a highlight in that movie around like a messy other rest of the movie kind of thing. So there were definitely things to enjoy even among some of the movies that like weren't going to be in the top 10 for me this year.
I saw other movies that don't make my honorable mentions that I just don't think were good movies.
Oh yeah.
Next up for me is Red, White, and Royal Blue. You guys probably don't know this one. It's based off of a book. It is a movie. It's a rom-com about the son of the President of the United States and the Prince of England.
Yeah.
Ending up in a tertiary
Netflix
like
movie,
conflict,
right? Yeah.
and then they fall in love, and it's beautiful, and they're both super hot.
Yeah.
It is.
I
It
saw
is
a lot
a.
of I know a lot about this movie. I haven't seen it, but I know I've seen so many
It's really good.
things on that movie all over
It's
social
really
media.
good.
Yeah.
But it's like a 7 out of 10 film for me.
Yeah. It's like a Hallmark made for like movie
Yeah,
kind of thing.
it's much more of like a Hallmark film. It's I think it was through Prime, and it was just like a great like fun like.
Yeah.
It was
That's
a
great
fun.
shout out.
It was a
Tim,
fun
yeah.
gay movie, and I love those. So,
Sure.
next up is
That's a really good
Wish.
shout-out.
Wish is not on my top 10. Is it on yours, Trevor?
I have it on mine. Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about it then.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the end of mine. There are some films like I want to give a shout out to just because I didn't get a chance to see them. I haven't watched them yet. Saltburn is one of those. And then also Killers of the Flower Moon. That is a film that I have been wanting to watch, but I just need to take like 4 hours of my day to set aside for it. So
That's it. That's a great point. I should have done the same thing in mind. Thank you for reminding me, Cam. Yeah, so I haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon either. That's important for my top 10. I have not seen John Wick 4 yet either. That's important for my top 10, right? I started a John Wick rewatch, but didn't get to John Wick 4 in time, so I have not seen John Wick 4. So it almost certainly would be in my top 10, as probably would Killers of the Flower Moon, but they're not on this list because I have not seen them yet. Saltburn I haven't seen either, but I'm less incentivized to see that one.
it's a movie that's kind of launched like 1,000 memes, and I don't get any of them. And my boss has like informally asked me, because she's like, I don't think it's appropriate for me to like ask you to watch that movie because of its content. Like, and we're like we work together, but like on a personal level, like you should watch that movie. It's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are two important shout outs I haven't seen.
All right. Well, I will slide over to my honorable mentions. And so my total list, whenever I do my actual write up on this, is 19 movies. So I'll just kind of like run through all of them, including the bad ones. The Flash was the worst movie I saw last year.
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
The Flash was terrible.
Right.
I didn't want to give it an honorable mention.
That was last year.
You liked it better than I did because you liked some of the very cheesy things.
I liked Supergirl, and I like Batman. Everything else about that movie was absolute dog shit.
Yeah, it's in our ranking, I give it a dumpster fire, which is like 0.5 to 1.5. It's in that realm because that was a bad movie and like a waste of potential in many other areas.
You give it a 0.5. Wow.
I'm saying it like our dumpster fire range on our 20-point scale would have been 0.5 to 1 or 1.5. So it falls in somewhere in there. It's probably like a 1.5. Because there are a couple shining lights.
I would give it like a 2 personally. So like I liked it better than Trevor. But we both think it sucks.
I mentioned before Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, barely above that a little bit. It's in my bad rankings, bad category, alongside Shazam: Fury of the Gods.
Dodged that one.
Then we get to my favorite of the DC movies this year, with a mediocre and my first actual honorable mention. Blue Beetle. Yeah, I know I didn't see Aquaman, so I guess that one might be better. But yeah, I just didn't. I did not bother. Blue Beetle. My first actual honorable mention, I'll say.
That's a good shout out.
Is an incredibly generic superhero origin story. If you've seen any of the MCU ones or even half of the DC ones, it's that. But the highlight of this movie is the kind of the lead, whose name is escaping me right now. But he's the guy from
Cobra Kai.
Cobra Kai. Him and his family, led most notably by George Lopez, are like the thing that this movie has that does make it stand apart a little bit. And they're like the fun extra little flavor. Xolo Maridueña, I think, is maybe the kid's name. But yeah, like he and like his family are good, but everything else is incredibly like paint by the numbers. Similarly, the Marvels, we talked about a little bit already. Miss Marvel, great in that.
Yes.
I like that they gave Brie Larson more to do compared to Captain Marvel, where she's not playing like amnesiac the entire time. So she got to, stretch her wings a little bit, including like on the music planet and whatnot. But there's like a whole bunch of just still nothing there, or it's a very kind of like cluttered film. Haunted Mansion, like you guys already talked about, has some like really fun highlight performances for a movie that was sent out to die over the summer. It came out right as the strikes were all starting, so like it got no promotion. It basically just died on the vine. But it was fun to sit down and do as part of our Halloween month of that D Plus show.
Came out a week after Barbenheimer. Like, it just had no shot in the dark at making a splash.
Yep. The Little Mermaid, the live action version,
I didn't see that.
Right.
is the first of like my decent movies. So it was like number 13 overall for me, I think. It much like most of the live action Disney remakes doesn't need to exist, but it is probably one of the best ones in terms of like the Halle Bailey, who is the new Ariel in this. Phenomenal voice, great performance. Like she's definitely a good standout. They give her an inner monologue, so we get to kind of like get a sense of more about who she is as the movie goes on. And they do a good job of kind of fleshing out the Prince Eric side of things as well a little bit. So yeah, like she was a standout, and the music in that still great all these years later. I don't understand in the live action remake thing of like for Under the Sea, they talk about, you know, a bass playing the bass and like all of the musical instruments that those things are doing. No musical instruments, no nothing. They like the closest they get is like dancing. And it's like, then change the songs, change the lyrics. If you're not going to have, you know, a flute play the lute and a, you know, carp play the harp, just don't do those things. Don't say those lines. What are you doing? So yeah, just baffling things, but not anywhere near the like I hate the Lion King live action, quote unquote live action. So yeah, Little Mermaid gets there. Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny we already talked about, and then yeah, my number 11 would have been the Super Mario Brothers movie, which we will, it sounds like, talk about a little bit later when we get to it on Cameron's list.
Well, if we want to start with me, we can talk about it right now.
All
It's
right,
my number
cool.
10.
Well, we'll keep the order of things going.
I gotcha. Okay.
So we'll fly over to Logan's number 10 first.
We can change it if we need to. I just wanted to.
We'll keep it the order. It works.
Yeah, no, I'm for my own sake of like keeping the doc updated. we're gonna stick with Logan. So yeah, Logan, hit me with your number 10.
I did just want to give a couple shouts to other movies I hadn't seen because I had pulled up my list so I didn't forget anyone. So I haven't seen Past Lives yet, but I desperately want to. I haven't seen The Holdovers yet. It's on my list to do.
Yeah, it's on my list.
I'll probably watch Holdovers tonight. In fact, I just didn't get to it. And then the most important one, even more than Close of the Flower Moon, is I have not seen Poor Things yet. And I want to very badly. I know I will love Poor Things as someone who's a big fan of The Lobster. And just kind of all the work.
That's a weird director,
and so
that's a weird dude. I
have not seen that one.
Is going to be a weird movie
because Poor Things is maybe the strongest of all of them that could actually crack my like top 3 even depending on how much I like it. So I just wanted to give that a preface as well. I will in terms of the reason I kind of gave my whole list is by the time we get through all my top 10, you'll know what movies I saw and which ones I didn't over the year. But yeah, just kind of getting it out of the way. I haven't seen any of those movies either. Poor Things is probably the closest one that would have intrigued me enough. I've not seen The Lobster, but I love everybody who's in Poor Things and have heard great things about Poor Things. Yeah.
Weirdly, I've heard that Poor Things is basically like a more avant-garde Barbie, with like a lot of the same kind of themes that are in Barbie and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see, if those would have shaken out. But yeah,
I'm gonna try to make Trevor sit down and watch Saltburn with me.
That's not going to happen.
Iron Claw either I haven't seen.
Oh, Iron Claw's another
that
one on
movie's
my
just
list I
gonna
want to see.
be really sad. You guys gonna be really just prepared to be sad for 2, and that story is super sad.
Oh, yeah.
We already know the story behind the family.
I
so
do
we're
too. That's the thing. Like I already
aware.
knew the story, so just like it's just like, oh, do I want to sit down for that bummer?
Yeah.
Yep. I told my boss, I was like, I've never been so excited to be so depressed.
Yeah, right. It's that Zac Efron looks amazing in that movie. He's like out of his mind, shredded.
They all are.
Anyway,
they're sick. They look so incredible.
Yeah. All right. So now with all of those out of the way, hit me with your number 10, Logan.
Let me pull it up so I don't get it wrong again. I got those out. So yeah, number 10 for me is going to be Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1.
I have that higher on my list, so we'll talk about that. No, it's not much higher, so we'll talk about it shortly. But yeah, we'll talk about it in a little bit. So Cam, now we can talk about Super Mario Brothers movie.
Super Mario,
your number 10.
Yeah, my number 10 is Super Mario Brothers movie. It is, I think it's a really solid film. I think that it captures what is kind of the quintessential Mario narrative, which is it's a little guy trying to do big things to help out other people. That's kind of like the kind of quintessential, Jumpman aspect of the game, of all the games. And then it just fills in the colors of this, like, if you compare like the basic bare bones of it being like a sketch, the rest of this movie is just filling it out with color and definition and bringing bringing so many things full circle, whether it's like the parallel between the two worlds, giving a shout out to the OG like Super Mario Brothers movie of they're from Brooklyn and all this stuff. And then you have, the whole like going through the magic pipes. It's just, and then you just meet this cast of characters that I think is just super solid. They bring in a compelling enough narrative to keep that movie going, and then throw you just some out of left field curveballs with like just everything Jack Black's Bowser does. And there's so much about this movie that it's just like kind of like just funny coincidence that it ended up all just filling in. I'm a big fan of Illumination as a studio. I think I remember watching the OG Despicable Me and being like, wow, that's good. But never predicting that the Minions would blow up the way that they did. And then just like, Despicable, the last one movie I saw was like from them was Despicable Me 3, and like that's still a solid film. Like they're just a solid animation studio, and them getting an opportunity to work with Miyamoto to bring the story of Mario to life in such a fun, eclectic way. Great. Like, is there faults to this movie? Absolutely. It's a lot of like super generic stuff to it. There's some super generic, like used in every movie sequence songs. But there's also such a great introduction of, and like kind of like remix or redo of some classic Mario songs, like just for the movie. And then on top of it all, you have Peaches by Bowser, Jack Black's Bowser.
I agree.
And it's just, Jack Black, the fact that they were just like, hey, Jack Black writes a song about every movie that he does. And they heard Peaches from Jack Black. And he's like, yeah, that was a fun thing that I did. And they're like, cool, can we put it in the movie? We want this in the movie. Also, go shoot a music video for it.
Oh, the music video is so good.
And it's just iconic. It's just, people were like, Jack Black as Bowser. But I'll never forget, one of the first things that somebody did was they're like people don't understand who Jack Black really is. And they show there's a clip from him on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. And he goes, he has like a toy saxophone.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
I see that constantly make the rounds on like Instagram reels and stuff.
Yeah. It's just like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, motherfucker. And it's like, people like, that's the kind of energy he brings to Bowser, of just like mean and gruff, but also at the same time, like, yeah, we're going to take over the Mushroom Kingdom. He's like, yeah, and then Peach will marry me. And it's just everybody just has like a stop moment. And it's like, it's such an iconic moment of the film.
It's
where like his plot is revealed and it's just the worst.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I said, I think it's my number 11. So it just misses the top 10. And where it comes down to me is, yes, as a lifelong video game fan and somebody who grew up playing, the original Marios and stuff, I love how many Easter eggs and how much like love and care and those kinds of beats that they threw in there. And the voice cast, Chris Pratt included, is like surprisingly fun. Like I think everybody does very well in the film. I love the rivalry that comes out between Donkey Kong and Mario, even when they fall on the same side. You still have Seth Rogen calling Mario an idiot and like, yeah, because your dad's right about you. You are a failure.
So brutal. But
like, the story was so paper thin. Yeah. And I was like, I can't reward that with like a spot in my top 10. It just does too many other tropey like things like holding out for a hero, being like, okay, like nobody's ever gonna do it better than Shrek 2. Why does why do they keep putting this movie this song into in here? But yeah, like Jack Black, a ton of fun. Peach is obviously a fun banger early in the year. But yeah, just it was too, because it's not even like, again, like Illumination can absolutely do like the joke that is for kids but also for adults, as you'll see in like the Despicable Me things, and just this didn't have any of those. Like, if I wasn't a fan of Mario, this wouldn't have really had anything for me it. And so beyond just like being able to point at the screen and do the Leonardo DiCaprio, like I recognize all of those things, it's like, okay, cool, but give me a little bit more. Don't just give me 90 minutes of like cheap nostalgia pop. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen like just a slightly deeper story. Give me 10 extra minutes of like character development or growth or plot, and it's just not really there. Logan, anything to add from you?
I think it's maybe the movie I would most just want to look at. I think visually it's beautiful. I think the way they rendered like all of Mushroom Kingdom is, I think, gorgeous. Like, it's such like vibrant, rich colors that I love to look at it. And like just like stills in the movie, I think are just so beautiful. I don't disagree with a lot of either one of you. Both Cameron's praise and Trevor's kind of issues with it. Like I sort of said a little bit ago, it's one of those movies where like I feel like I think about it more fondly than I felt when I watched it. And so maybe it's a movie that upon a rewatch I might like more, and it might crack my top 10. But in some ways I kind of like the duality of what I have at number 10, Mission Impossible, and what I have at number 11, in terms of like how different those movies are in a lot of ways, right? Where Mario is a 90-minute, super bright, colorful lollipop of a movie that's like just like a sugar rush and fun. And Mission Impossible is this giant, like 3-hour long, sweeping epic that has its own issues. And so they're sort of perfectly married together at 10 and 11. But it's really good. And I will say, even more so than movies ahead of it on my list, I would probably watch the Mario movie more frequently. Just because it's such a fun, like I think I'm higher on it than Trevor is, probably closer to Cameron. I think it's a movie that's just like a great like 90-minute like fun time, right? And like you can just throw it on and not have to like worry about it, and like I can see myself watching it like again and again and again, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely like if I had kids and like needed to entertain them with something, I could throw that on and have it on in the background while I'm doing other things and whatnot. And I will say the last thing I'll say on it and sing its praises is, apart from like the needle drop soundtrack things that I don't think work in the film, the adaptations of like classic Mario music are great across the board. And it like so it has one of the best scores of the year, even if like the soundtrack is weaker.
I did want to give a shout out to also, because Trevor talked about the voice cast, but like in particular, like I think Keegan-Michael Key as Toad is
great,
phenomenal. I think he's so good. And like Jack Black deservedly gets a lot of praise for like stealing the movie, but like Keegan-Michael Key is like just as good, I think, in like a way less scene stealing role, but is just like pitch perfect as it.
I think Jack Black's is a performance where it's still Jack Black. Keegan-Michael Key is, his performance is transformative.
He's just Toad, that's like it's perfect. Yeah,
he's totally transformed his voice in that higher pitch range and turned it from just like a to an actual voice with a character and like dialogue that's not annoying and grating. He does a phenomenal job of taking like just an annoying like sound and turning it into an actual voice for a character.
I mean, it's the thing that like when we first heard Chris Pratt as Mario, everybody was like, that doesn't sound like Mario. I'm like, I guarantee you would not want to sit through 90 minutes of "It's a me, Mario," and just that nonsense. That would be incredibly grating, incredibly quickly, just like Toad could have very easily become. It was very much, and I like that they do at least kind of call out like, oh, like they do the Mario commercial at the beginning where he is doing that voice, is like, do you think it's a little much? So like they give the fans that moment, and obviously Charles Martinet gets like his little moments in the sun. But yeah, it like for people who are like, this isn't how my Mario sounds like, it's like your Mario has never been scripted to like talk for more than a couple seconds at a time in any of those
Right.
games. I guarantee you would not want to hear that voice for that long.
Yeah.
So
It's towards transformative. Such a good one. And then on top of that, also I want to give like a massive shout out to the inclusion of like using Mario Kart as like just a transporting like thing, but giving us like Rainbow Road. Like the way they include Easter eggs is it never feels
clever.
like, hey guys, remember this thing? Remember this thing? There's always something that includes it into it. Even to the point when they bring in one of those little blue stars from Mario Galaxy, and it's like, well, what's the narrative purpose of this? Well, this is just a downer in a prison cell who's excited to die.
Yeah.
And it's just like so
that's
cripplingly.
the closest that you get to something for the adults watching the movie.
It's great though. It's really good.
Just solid, just a solid film. But like, yeah, that's why it's my number 10. I think if this movie was any longer than 90 minutes, it would definitely fall off my top 10. You can't keep a story this paper thin going for longer than 90 minutes, because even 90 minutes, you're really pushing it.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, yeah, you only make this movie longer if you're adding something to it to make it longer. Don't just add 10 minutes of nothing. Yeah.
No,
It would have been interesting, though, an alternate universe where this movie was 15 minutes longer, had a little bit more character development, and made my list and dropped out of yours.
oh no, I think if they'd done more, for me, it's if they'd given us like 10 or 15 more minutes of like Easter eggs, or like make some of like the sequences longer, like Rainbow Road longer, like doesn't add anything to the story,
Gotcha.
would have grated on me. Adding more story to like flesh it out and make it not so paper thin would have been a plus for me as well. But
Gotcha.
I didn't anticipate that. So
Cool. Well, my number 10, which I know is at least higher on Cameron's list, is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So we will hold off and talk about it later.
Number 12 for me.
So let's throw it back over to you, Logan, for your number 9.
Yeah, my number 9 is only on my list, I have to assume. It is The Archies, which is a Bollywood adaptation of the Archie comic story.
Okay.
It is set in 1960s India. It is a musical, and it's really good. It's a ton of fun. It got a lot of hate, apparently in India, because of like Nepo baby shit for like 80% of the cast, which like fair enough, but like, and Shravya didn't like it as much as I did, but I loved it. I think it is so much fun. I think it's just oozes charm. You know, I think to take a story that is so old, for lack of a better word, that I can even describe for Archie, right? But that is a comic series that is so beloved in India and Indian culture, and then marry it with kind of their like film stylistic choices. I think it comes out so great. Like the opening number in particular, I think is a blast. Like weirdly enough, the worst part of the Archies is probably Archie, which is how you know it's an actually truthful adaptation of the Archie story, because that's always been the case. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, right? Like Veronica and Betty, I think, are great. I think the cast of characters around them are really good. I think some of the stuff they have with like the kids' parents is actually really good, and explores like more interesting ideas, because it's set in like a like city within India, basically, in like 1960s that is like Anglo-Indian. So like people who had kind of came from like an Indian and English people marrying during like colonial period, and like they have built their own city. And I think like it exploring that idea of like not really belonging into either camp is done really well. And yeah, I think it's just like a really fun, joyous ride. Its ending is a little rushed, which holds it back somewhat, but I think so many of the musical numbers are done so well. I think the cast, who are primarily like probably 17 to like 22, 23, really, really work. And I think the way that like it fleshes out more minor Archie characters, and in one case gives one like a really prominent key role, just works wonderfully. And like I think it's done with such a like deft touch and like love and care to it, and it is hard not to be smiling for most of the Archies. So that is my number 9 pick.
Nice. Always fun to have like weird.
And it's on Netflix. I encourage everyone.
There you
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's a short, like 2 hour, 20-minute long movie. So short for Bollywood standards.
There you go. Cool. I imagine, you have nothing to add on this one, Cameron, so we can probably just move to your number 9.
Okay. My number 9 is Elemental.
Elemental, higher on the
Higher.
list.
Yep. fair enough.
We will talk about it later down the line.
Near simultaneous there, Trevor. Yeah.
So my number 9 is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, Part 1, which I don't imagine you never saw it, Cam,
Nope.
right?
I've never seen a Mission Impossible movie.
There you go.
Any of them?
Nope.
Oh, really?
Nope.
Oh, I think you'd like that. We'll get into that later.
Yeah. I saw this with Logan when he was out here on his way to law school. We went and saw it to kill some time on I don't even remember what it was, a Monday, Tuesday, something like that. I like Mission Impossible is one of those, like, I've seen half of the Mission Impossibles probably, starting with, I think I've maybe seen Ghost Protocol. Actually, I don't think I have. I think I started with the fourth one. The Brad Bird one is the one.
Oh God.
I think it was the fourth one. Like the one where like Tom Cruise is hanging from the building in
Ghost
Dubai.
Protocol.
Is it Ghost Protocol? And Mission Impossible 3 is the J.J. Abrams one? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then yes, Ghost Protocol. And then I've seen like every other one since then, I think.
It's like Rogue Nation, Fallout.
So Dead Reckoning Part 1 here, it was like it was very much kind of like I kind of know some of these characters, and some some of them are new. Have you
never seen Mission Impossible 1?
No.
We're gonna watch this Mission Impossible movie, guys. This is crazy. Yeah, okay. We're gonna have a good time.
I mean, like, there's a whole backstory element to this one that I kind of was like, oh, is that like stuff from the first movie? And finding out after the fact, it's like, no, that's just kind of
not really. They just
those are fake flashbacks.
Yeah.
Those are flashbacks to a thing before even the first movie.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, okay, well, that's an interesting little dynamic, because I knew like one of the guys from this. I knew like Kitchener, I think, or whatever, is like from the first movie, and hadn't been back since. So it's like interesting little elements of like that. The fact that this one obviously a part 1 of 2 kind of thing. There were a lot of those this year. And this one I think does a good job in terms of like, at least it still tells like a full self-contained story, and has like, I mean, I thought it did. I think.
We disagree on that, but we'll get into it.
Yeah. I mean, we won't dig too deep into it, but I thought in terms of like some character moments and kind of the trying to get the MacGuffin for this movie, they get the MacGuffin for this movie, but they have to do something with the MacGuffin in the next movie is basically like where the break is. And so I was okay with that. I wish like the big end of the movie stunt hadn't been plastered on like marketing stuff for the last 2 years.
It's really impressive to me. Like, it is amazing. It's just
I've
seen it 100 times.
Exactly. I've seen it in every spot that you've shown about this movie for the last 2 years. Obviously, because this was, a pandemic movie that, got shut down and kind of held up during COVID and all that stuff. But yeah, I think Haley Atwell is a ton of fun in here. I think a great addition. She has a great fun chemistry with Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise still being Tom Cruise and doing all the things he does. This time decided to be like, I'm going to get into close-up magic for a couple sequences, which is like, okay, that's sure. But yeah, like Simon Pegg, Vic Raines, like his crew is still a very fun kind of core cast. And the extra new additions I thought were fun as well. I thought the guy kind of playing the like big bad was a fun, very charismatic performance. He's Gabriel in the film. I don't know the actor's name. But I like what he's kind of bringing to the table. And I liked like a year removed from like all of the Bond movies last year, it felt very much kind of like a fun flavor of that kind of Bond-esque thing with like, I'm sitting there kind of ranking the henchmen and figuring out, what I want to, like, where would I put them and all that stuff. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one. It's definitely not a thing I've thought about a ton since, but in a year that was, like with both Guardians of the Galaxy and Mission Impossible here, we're getting into the movies I consider like good on our That Nerdy Site scale, which is like your 7s and up, basically. So yeah, I had a good time with this one. I think it's a good movie, and I had fun with it. And there are definitely elements of it where I'm like, it's a little too close to home with all the AI stuff and whatnot. But yeah, I had a fun time with this one, and not just because I was seeing it with fun company.
Oh, at the end you snuck it in. I think for me, a lot of the AI stuff doesn't work, right? A lot of it doesn't land.
Sure.
And I think part of that is because I think it's hard to have a movie where the big bad is not an actual person.
Yeah, I mean, when they say up front that the big bad is going to be thinking a billion steps ahead of you, so how do you ever, outthink it?
Like,
it's like, okay, well then any reason this movie happens is because the screenwriters are letting this movie happen. You've made your villain too powerful to like realistically be able to defeat. And so the fact that the algorithm doesn't just like somehow immediately wipe them all off the map is like, okay, well then this is weird.
It's weird too, because like there's one exception, but for the most part it's like this weird thing of like Gabriel, who really should just be the big bad, but is in essence a henchman, like, and it leads to like this awkward like power imbalance, I think, where like they're just sort of going against like a ghost essentially. There's one exception where they're at like the like party where it uses like flash and like strobe effects to kind of imitate the AI, and I think that's done really well. I really like that sequence a lot. But for the most part, I think there's just something missing here, and it is the main villain. I think the ending, and it's sort of a shame to the movie, like Trevor just said, is from a stunt coordination perspective, spectacular. Like there's really no other word to describe the whole sequence, both like the jump itself, we've seen a million times, but also like everything involved in the train and getting on it and the fight in there, and then like it's Uncharted 2 derailment, right? Like all of that is incredible. The issue is that this is not a short movie to begin with, and then to get to kind of the end of like a near 3-hour long movie and then still be like, all right, we're still like halfway through the story, sort of like, all right, like that's disappointing. And I think the movie does struggle with having these kind of spikes and then these kind of cool down periods throughout it. And I don't think it's as like consistent and building as I maybe would have preferred. But honestly, a lot of my frustration with the movie is the AI stuff. It just doesn't work for me. And it was interesting to watch it with like me, you, and Brandon, and be, I think, the one who was the coolest on it. I think Brandon was the most high on it. He really liked it a lot, and the AI stuff worked for him really well. And so it's also just like to each their own. But it just left me wanting more, especially in a series that has really great villains, right? Like it's such, I mean, like Philip Seymour Hoffman in Mission Impossible 3 is phenomenal, but even, like the villains in like Fallout or Rogue Nation, Ghost Protocol, all really get great and engaging. And I think you're just left, and even Mission Impossible 1, you're just left wanting something more. And the James Bond comparison, I think, is, obviously apt because that's what they've been trying to mimic for 25 years. And that's a series that also, right, is made up of so many great, iconic villains, that you kind of get to this one and you're sort of like, oh, I just want that person to choose scenery, alongside Tom Cruise, and you just never really get that. Right?
And for me, that was like the Gabriel. Yeah, obviously he is more henchman because AI is the real big bad.
And I don't disagree, right? I just think, the fact that they sort of, by design of what the story is, had to kind of keep knocking him down to be like, he's not the main guy. And it's just sort of like, I wish, like, if anything, I'd have almost structured the movie where like you don't know about the AI twist until like the end. That way, throughout this movie, you think it is something that Gabriel's doing, and then you find that out and there is a larger thing. And that way, you're not sort of constantly being like, all right, but like this ultimately is whatever. And that way, like to Trevor's point, it's not like it's making a billion calculations a second. So whatever you do, it's already known. And like they even reference that in the movie where like, a person betrays someone, right? And it's like boom, like I knew this because of the AI already told me to do that, and like what I have to do to stop you kind of thing. And it's like, all right, but if it's that, it's meant to like pick up on that possible calculation because of this one thing happening an hour ago. It's like, I feel like anything we do, it could foresee, but it's impressive. It's incredible. It's a series that has a really high benchmark. I think there's only been one not good Mission Impossible movie even. And so you're also great on a curve within the series. There's a really high standard. And it still made my top 10. But I think it's one of the movies that fell victim to, my expectations were so high, especially after, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout, which is, almost a masterpiece, right? That this one just was a little bit of a misstep for me in some areas that held it back a little bit, but still great.
Gotcha. All right. Well, yeah. This anywhere you haven't seen any, so yeah, you have nothing to add to this one, Cam. So let's throw it back over to you, Logan, for your number 8.
I'm gonna do it.
A lot of quiet
8,
coming from me. Sorry, guys. Just
all good.
My number 8 is gonna be Fremont. And this is a movie I just watched right now.
Okay.
It is a movie filmed and set in Fremont, California. It's in black and white. It's basically the story of a former Afghan translator for the U.S. Army who's living in Fremont, California now, after the fall of Afghanistan and everything, and just like her story. And it's just sort of like a very dry kind of like lyrical film. It's only like an hour and a half long. Jeremy Allen White kind of pops in the last like 15-20 minutes, and he's really great in it as well. But it's just kind of a woman's story of kind of finding herself and just kind of being alone. It's a very kind of minimalist dialogue thing, but it's kind of the awkward and funny interaction she has kind of everyone around her that I think work really well. I think it's really beautifully shot and told. And I think in kind of, the classic like indie-esque scenes, it's like definitely like one of those movies like that is very art housey. But I think I liked a lot of that. And while its ending is not entirely what I wanted it to be, I still think we get to a really beautiful place. There's one sequence in particular, where like one of our main characters, like friends, is just like singing basically like karaoke, that is like beautiful. And it's like easily like I think one of the emotional highs of the movie. But yeah, I really liked it. It's just she's working at like a fortune cookie factory. She ends up like being the person who writes the fortunes and the fortune cookies. Like the interactions between like her and her like therapist are like really funny. And kind of very like surrealist, and her therapist keeps like being like, who my favorite immigrant is? White Fang. Which is like a novel about like a wolf dog essentially. And the way he keeps trying to like compare her arc to White Fangs is like very silly. And the way she tries to sort of like appease him with that is also very good. And yeah, it's just like, it's a really funny, quiet, contemplative movie. And
the dog?
Yeah,
the dog from White Fang?
He's a wolf, as the therapist will remind you again and again and again throughout the movie. He's a 3/4 wolf, so he's mostly wolf. Because she keeps, and that's another great gag. She keeps referring to him as like the dog, and he goes, "It's a wolf." But yeah, it's great, and I really enjoy it. And like I said, it's like an hour and like 30 minutes long.
It's her therapist doing this?
Yeah, and like trying to connect to her. It's really great. And so yeah, I encourage everyone to check it out. I like its black and white nature as well. There's like a nice little like beauty to that, and yeah, it was my number 8. It's a nice little quiet, contemplative Fremont.
All right, cool. Cam, hit me with your number 8.
Yeah, my number 8 is Evil Dead Rise.
Evil Dead Rise. All right, is nowhere on my list, so
not on mine.
There we go. So yeah,
Yeah, here we go. Now it's my time to shine.
Oh crap!
Evil Dead Rise is the latest film in the Evil Dead franchise. I'm a massive fan of, like we've talked about this before. I'm a big Sam Raimi head. I love Sam Raimi's films. His OG student film that launched his career was The Evil Dead Part 1. Evil Dead 2 being its actual film, like full-length film entry into the saga, leading up to Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 3, and then of course the Evil Dead TV show, the remake of Evil Dead, and now Evil Dead Rise, continuing on the saga. I just think it's an absolute spectacle of a film. It's just excellent in the way that it's executed. It is now... So Sam Raimi is no longer directing; he's producing. I'm looking at my notes here for what I wrote here.
Was obviously this one isn't centered around Ash.
No,
but did Bruce Campbell have a cameo in here?
Bruce Campbell does not have a cameo in
That's
this
so
movie.
weird to me that like there's an Evil Dead without Bruce Campbell out there.
The big point of that is that he has retired the character Ash.
Okay.
Bruce Campbell no longer
After
is
the
playing
show.
Ash in live action. However, there's been some pushback out of like some latest stuff that might not be the case in a future entry. But for right now, like they're like, why didn't he show up with a cameo? And at the time, Bruce Campbell's just like, he's retired. Like where he ends up at the end of Ash vs. the Evil Dead, the Showtime show, is basically like the end of that character's arc. And so like that was like, he is not in this type of existence. I will say.
So then is there, I get like my question then is there an Ash type character in this one? Because I like everything I saw was really leaning into the horror side of it and not like the quirky comedy that like I feel is like what set Evil Dead apart.
This movie is really into the horror aspect of it. Like it really doubles down on the horror.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm trying to remember his name here. I have it written down here somewhere, but it is essentially, so the direction is done by, I think it's Irish director Lee Cronin. He found that, I think his approach to it is, Sam Raimi has the way that he shoots his movies is like, that's where a lot of the comedy comes from, is the way that it's shot and like, you know, and the way that it kind of like takes on certain situations to make them feel a little bit more comedic than, you know, horror driven. But where I think he takes from the kind of credit of, you know, to give credit to Sam Raimi is creating very quickly dynamic and interesting characters. And part of the problem with a lot of horror movies is that these characters are basically stocked up and designed to be killed. Something that's really heavily done here is every single one of the characters that's introduced in this movie has a future after this evening, like after the night that this all happens. They all have plans. They all have lives that they have going on. And so it's not just like the circumstances caused them to be in this situation and like, but it's not like they have anything going afterwards. Like there's an impact to people not making it in this movie. Like there's serious impact to it. But I will say Lily Sullivan and Alyssa Sutherland, they're two Australian actresses. They play the leads in this film. They're sisters who, one is like a professional equipment manager for for big rock bands, and so she is like living this tour lifestyle, and then she is reuniting, reconciling with her sister who is going through a divorce, and their apartment is being their entire apartment building complex is being condemned in LA. It's a great look at struggling lower class in LA, and kind of like the circumstances happening that there's an earthquake that's caused that reveals that underneath this building is an old, because this building's built on an old bank, and one of those bank storage units housed and it reveals that there's actually 3 Necronomicons, and it expands the lore of the universe in a way that was kind of already introduced in Ash vs. the Evil Dead, that they started introducing more and more stuff about like the Deadite and like the history of that. This gets pulled into it. This is where Bruce Campbell actually does have a cameo. I apologize. Bruce Campbell has a cameo as one of the priests who tells the priests who read the Necronomicon and record it that they're making a massive mistake and not to do it. And there was a hidden note by the director who also wrote the film that in his mind, this is a version of Ash that is from like the past, who didn't make it back to the future. Basically, like creating like this idea of like multiple versions of Ash throughout time, because it's part of the time displacement that happens in Ash's story. Awesome idea. And Bruce Campbell's like, yeah, that would have been a really cool thing to do, but like I'm not really like, so like Bruce Campbell does make a cameo in it, but it's verbal and audio. But it's really cool. It has a trans actor in it. I have their name written down here, but I apologize I don't have it here. But the entire cast of characters is awesome, whether it's minor characters like the neighbors or the core family themselves. They're all phenomenal in it. There is humor in it, but there's a lot of tragedy, I feel like. There's a real focus on the fact that these people's lives are taken from them through this awful thing happening that's beyond their control. Because the brother, the oldest sibling, is the one that takes the stuff of the Necronomicon from the bank vault. But his idea is he's going to sell it and pawn it off and like sell it to make money so they can like pay for a new place. Because that's kind of where they're at right now. They're going to be out on the street because their building's being condemned. And so his mind is, if I can get cash from this stuff. So he's actually like inventorying it and like kind of like looking through stuff when he incidentally like accidentally causes the record where the Necronomicon is read to play. And it's kind of like just like a real big, like, had no idea what he was getting into. And it unfortunately launches all the stuff that happens in the evening. And so it's set up as like a real tragedy due to circumstances. It's like if this family if their building hadn't been condemned, if there was affordable and equal housing in LA, like all these societal things led to this moment of this kid trying to do the right thing by his family, inadvertently causing this awful thing to happen, which is a very telling story about poverty also. So it's hitting a lot of those like Sam Raimi's original intent with the Deadites and everything was to be kind of like through the lens of drug addiction, and which is why in the reboot done in I think it was 2013, the Ash character for that film, she is a former drug addict who they're taking up there so that she can get clean. So drug addiction, a lot of these things that are like societal issues that Sam Raimi has kind of like viewed through the Evil Dead, like the original Evil Dead movies, losing a lot of that steam later in Army of Darkness and Ash vs. the Evil Dead, but is re-examined here as well. And it brings up kind of the idea of like what is a family, what makes up a family. And like, yeah, it's awesome stuff. It's a great film, brilliantly acted through it. The over-the-top, like, schlocky horror, brilliantly done, like, unbelievably cool, unbelievably well done, has one of the coolest, like, intros of any recent movie, of, like, title card intro. It's so good. But overall, it's a bloody good, gory time that, like, has some heartbreak in it. It makes you sad. So.
Okay.
Like any good horror movie.
Yeah. Good horror movies make you care about people who die. Like,
yes.
Cool. Well, my number 8 is Wish, which you said was on your honorable mentions, Cam. I don't imagine it's on your list, Logan, right?
Nope.
Yeah. So we'll talk about it here. Yeah, Disney's like big animated film to celebrate the company's 100th anniversary. I thought it was a fun new kind of take on things that is intentionally littered with a lot of like fun little Easter eggs to kind of the history. Like the main characters, like friends, are very clearly like inspired and modeled after the Seven Dwarves. So you have like a sleepy, a dopey, a bashful, all that fun stuff. And like each of them kind of have that as like their core character trait as well. So it's like a nice little nod to that. You have, references to Bambi and all that stuff. And yeah, I had a fun time, but like as a standalone thing, I think this girl who wants to, help the king fulfill wishes, only to discover that the king is kind of being incredibly selective about the wishes to ensure that like they keep him in power and stuff like that, is an interesting dynamic that they kind of like immediately kind of get out of the way and start really diving into to create the conflict. Chris Pine is a ton of fun as, the Magnifico. Alan Tudyk as the goat companion that magically gets given a voice early on, and then he just kind of ends up using his Clayface voice from the Harley Quinn series is funny, as Alan Tudyk tends to be in a lot of these things. And yeah, I mean the music is one of the things when I talked about the movie kind of after seeing it on this podcast was very much like none of the songs like immediately like rang out to me as super catchy. But it's the kind of thing that I imagine upon like re-listening to or something like that, or when it inevitably comes to Disney Plus and I sit down and like rewatch it, or we do that D Plus show on it or something like that, there will probably be a little bit of stuff that just kind of starts to resonate a little bit more. But like on a first hearing, there was a lot where I was like, none of this is really like super vibing with me, but it was beautiful animation, and going back to kind of a 2D animated style for a lot of it and stuff was a lot of fun. And yeah, I just had a fun time with this one. And I'm excited to see kind of, it was fun to see Ariana DeBose, hot off of, West Side Story a couple years back, kind of get the lead in this. I think she has a great voice. The songs are all performed incredibly well. None of them had like the super catchy hook that I was, found myself humming after the fact or anything like that. But yeah, it was a fun time. And yeah, I don't think I have a ton more to add. I think this is the last of the like good movies that I have for this year. Oh no, my next one is also in the good category. But yeah, I just had fun with Wish. Anything to add there, Cam?
I think you kind of nailed it all. I think I was a little less happy with Chris Pine's performance, mainly just because like I will just say like his villain song is very lackluster. I was not the biggest fan of it. I wasn't a big fan of really a lot of the music in this movie. In the same, I'm a little bit lower on it than Trevor is, I think, but and I think there's the overall like there was a lot of Easter eggs, and I think it really boils down to like how big of a Disney fan are you?
Right.
Like Trevor is way more of a Disney fan than I am, so he got way more out of this movie than I did. If you are not a Disney person, like this movie is going to be not great for you at all, because I don't think there's anything about the movie itself, like it's in and of itself, that makes it iconic or makes it stand out. But if you are if you are at any level a Disney fan, like the more you get out of this movie increases, the more and more of a Disney person you are, I think. That's the way I feel about it. The way when I've heard other people talk about it, it's like, okay, you're really much higher on it, but you're also way more invested in Disney and the Disney properties, Easter eggs, merchandise, memorabilia. I'm not. And so like, I'm like very much lukewarm on it. It's like, it's still in my teens. Like it's still a solid film. I think it lends itself to like some really good stuff, but I just don't think there's anything that really pops about it being iconic that would make it.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be like one of the like lambasted or panned Disney films. And it's like when you're talking about like the legacy of Disney, I think it's just going to be somewhere, in the middle.
Sure. All right. Then let's move over on to our number sevens. Ooh. Logan, hit me with your number 7 movie of the year.
I assume this will be higher on one, if not both of your lists, but my number 7, after a lot of thought, this is maybe the hardest one for me, is going to be Dungeons and Dragons.
Higher on my list.
Indeed, mine as well. Yep.
Okay. That's what I figured.
Cool. All right, then we'll throw it back over to you, Cam. What's your number 7?
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Okay. You don't have it higher on your list, Logan?
I have a number 12 on mine, so nope.
Okay. Then yeah, we will talk now about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
I don't want to spend too much time on it because we've literally done 2 podcasts about it.
Yeah.
We've done,
I think we've talked plenty about this movie. I will just to kind of like summarize some thoughts. Still a really great movie. I don't think it's the strongest of the Guardian films. It's still the strongest Marvel movie this year by, I think, a good mile.
Yeah, I think we all agree.
I think it's a great farewell to a lot of characters and kind of like they're not really farewell to characters, but rather where they're at in their journeys of where we followed them. This is a big transitionary film for the Guardians of kind of like what is the previous era and what is the new era. I think they did a really great way of kind of like ending it the way that they did, and giving everybody like it's a feel good ending. in a lot of ways. And if you want to hear more about what we thought, there's a That D Plus show episode about it. If you want to hear even more details about like what it was like coming off of that movie fresh, Trevor and I have a spoiler cast about it. You want to be like, hey, what do you guys think about like kind of like the body horror things? Listen to the spoiler cast. We go way in deep on it and talk about what's his face's directing history as like a
James Gunn.
Yeah, James Gunn's history as a trauma director and like how this all plays into it. Like you'll get all of that there in a massive deep dive across 2 different podcasts in 2 different formats too, because That D Plus show is not a spoiler cast format. It's a very different type of format.
I mean,
I will.
Oh, sorry. We do spoilers in it, but we don't do. It's not like a movie review in the same way that we do That D Plus show.
Yeah,
it's a very unique format. But yeah, go ahead.
That maybe my single favorite emotional beat in a movie in the entire year happened in this movie, when he finally goes back to Earth in the movie and meets his grandpa. It daggered me in a way that like I was, and like to be fair, like part of it just like this movie came out probably like a month and a half after my own grandfather passed away, so like I was just, but like, and like also because like I feel like they didn't signpost it in a way where like something happening to Rocket's friends was like, all right, well that just like has to happen, obviously. Even if it still was like very sad and like traumatic, but like the grandfather was like, again, it's something I say a lot of I love about movies, which is just like those quiet moments, right, where like a couple words are exchanged, right, and that's it, and just like his reaction, and then like even like the post-credit scene of like them just at like a coffee table together, just like ragging on their neighbors. It was like perfect. Like it was a moment of like genuine quiet beauty and like emotional depth in a Marvel movie that I think is kind of few and far between them. I think Wakanda Forever really did that. It was really well. I think Black Panther did those really well. I think a lot of the Captain America movies did those really well because his story is just kind of inherently sad in a lot of ways. But yeah, it really worked for me in that aspect. I really like Chris Pratt in this movie. In some ways, I think it might be his best performance in the trilogy because he's kind of almost playing against type for a lot of the movie. He is sort of at his messiest and his lowest of the entire trilogy here, and I think that aspect is really well. I think Bradley Cooper's really, really good as Rocket, and it's obviously very much a Rocket movie, but I think he really delivers a like really kind of tragic performance. And like that's like the thing too, like in some ways this movie is the darkest and saddest a Marvel movie's been in since Infinity War probably, and maybe beyond that, right? Like it is just such an unambiguously like sad and tragic filled movie, and I sort of like that. I think there were shades of them trying to kind of explore that in Multiverse of Madness, but I think it didn't land for me in that movie in the same way. But I just think this movie kind of is okay being in that area, like Cameron was saying. And ultimately it not being in my top 10 is more testament to the fact that like I think it's a good year for movies, A, and B, sort of because of how I think heavy and emotional this movie is and traumatic their sequences are. It's a movie that like I'm like, I saw that and I don't need to see it again for another 3 years. I got my fill of that one versus the other Guardians movies, which I think you can just kind of play every other day and have a great time with. But it's a very good movie, and it's probably the most emotionally mature of the trilogy for sure.
Yeah, like I said, it's my number 10. As kind of Cameron touched on, easily the best of the Marvel bunch this year.
That's easy.
Apart from Loki season 2, I think.
Yeah, I would say that's
on the TV side of things. Yeah. But the moment that sticks out to me is the moment when Rocket comes to and kind of says, well, at least we're all okay, or something like that. And like we cut to Nebula on the other side, like reacting to Rocket waking up and like having that like beautiful emotional beat. I think Dave Bautista gets a lot of great moments as Drax in this
Yes.
one.
Yes, that's a really good
And the
shout-out.
relationship between like Drax and Mantis is
Mantis.
like a fun unsung hero of this film. I think as we touched on in the other episodes, Gamora gets wasted largely not because of this movie, but because the decisions that were made in Endgame
Yes.
and Infinity War. So
I agree with that.
this just isn't our Gamora anymore. And
But I do like
But that's
that
part of the story, though, too.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
it's
I do
not
like
our
that they
Gamora
let
anymore.
her do her own thing, but I do agree that because of them allowing her to be her own thing, she is sort of wasted in this movie in terms of like what she could otherwise have been.
yeah. But yeah, I think the like all of the Rocket stuff just feels like an incredible emotional drain to watch
Yes.
and experience, and
Yeah.
I don't want to go through that. I don't enjoy any of that. Even the catharsis that you get in like the payoff moments isn't worth the amount of trauma that we have to sit through in those moments. So yeah, this is the weakest of the bunch for me. But I will and I think also because Rocket is sidelined for so much of the movie, as we touched on, like you lose the levity that he normally brings to the movie as well. So it's a double hit of like, not only are we losing his fun, we're also just steeped in trauma for him as a character. That makes that a little bit painful. But and the music in this one, much like kind of I said in the Super Mario stuff, like the soundtrack hits don't really work for me for a lot of this, with the exception of I really like the Beastie Boys.
Oh, the hallway scene.
Hallway fight is
so good.
I mean, like that fight works really well, and because it has a good fun Beastie Boys like energy underneath it, I think helps really sell that in the way
whole
that like
sequence
a
is
lot of
great.
other music and fight sequences don't really mash up for me all that well. But there is still like, you know, fun random comedy. Like I love Nathan Fillion coming in there and being like, yeah, I've got one of those too, and like, you know, his utter disdain for like the boss's nephew or whatever it is.
I like Star-Lord and Nebula's like, you open the fucking door, right? Like that whole sequence is really fun and really good.
Yeah. Mantis tapping the guard and being like, you desperately love him, and Drax just being like, not again. All right, hi. Like kind of be like playing it bashful, I think is like just the funnest choice he could have made in that moment. So he does a great job with there. So yeah, like lots of fun little like moments and highlights, but like the overall energy it takes to watch this movie is not a resource I want to just give freely to it. So it kind of rounds out my top 10, but and it'll be interesting to see what James Gunn does now over in DC land moving forward. Anything to add? Again, Cam, this was your number 7, so
Number 7,
I'll give you last words if you have any.
Nope. I think I'll leave it with this. This is a movie that's all about the heart of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's focused on like the heart of what makes the Guardians of the Galaxy beat, but it's also missing that heart for a lot of it because of circumstances of the plot. So still the best Marvel movie this year. One of like my number 7 film of the year, but just like it's I think it's the like lowest of what is ended up being the top tier Guardians of the Galaxy portion of the Marvel franchise that like nobody expected. So
cool. Well, my number 7, I think maybe higher on your list, Cameron, because it is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem.
It's one higher. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
For my number 6.
All right. We will talk
I
about
need to
it.
watch that. I should add that to my. I'm gonna add them to this right now.
There you go.
So
we will circle back to that very shortly. But Logan, hit us with your number 6.
My number 6 is gonna be Rocky Rani, which is a Bollywood film that's got Alia Bhatt in it and Ranveer Singh, the most beautiful man in the world. And it is great. It's a ton of fun. It is just like a really fun, joyous love story. The basic premise is that these two people who are very different, come from very different backgrounds and cultures, basically like fall in love while like setting their grandparents back up together, who had like kind of a long ago love, and in the process they fall in love, and they basically decide like for I think it's a month or two. The Ranveer Singh is going to stay with Alia Bhatt's family, and Alia Bhatt's going to stay with Ranveer Singh's family to show that they can, like, the families can commingle, right, and they coexist because they're both families don't want to be with the other one. And it's sort of the hijinks and emotional turmoil that kind of ensue. It's really good, right? I mean, I don't know what more to say about it. It's charming. It's silly. Ranveer Singh has a lot of charisma and charm to him. He's had it for about a decade at least, and he just kind of carries it in spades. He can do whatever he wants. He's just so talented. And I think the interplay between all the families, and I think kind of his transformation from kind of more of a traditional, kind of more masculine, patriarchal background to kind of evolve and to kind of be a more enlightened man is really fun to watch. Alia Bhatt being, you know, a bull in the china shop within his patriarchal family is a lot of fun to watch. And yeah, it's very sweet. I think it's very emotional. And some of the musical numbers in it, I think, are some of the most entertaining I've seen in a Bollywood film or any film in a long, long time. I think Cameron in particular would have like kind of a ball with the film. So yeah, Rocky Rani is my number 6 movie for the year.
Great. Yeah, I kept hearing that one come up in
it's
like
great.
The like
Everyone should watch it.
I watch Charts with Dan Merle on YouTube, pretty much on a weekly basis, and like that was one of the Indian films that was like did very well.
It's really good
over the course of the year. So it would occasionally pop up in his box office breakdowns and stuff. So
yeah, I encourage everyone to go watch it. It's on Netflix? Question mark? I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix. It's great. I mean, it's a ton of fun. And kind of more of a, I think, sophisticated and emotionally resonant film, and also like a more of a progressive film than Bollywood movies can be sometimes. Yeah, it's a great time.
Great. All right, then let's slide over. Cam, you said your number
TMNT.
6 here is TMNT Mutant Mayhem.
Yep.
Go ahead and kick us off.
The best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie property in years. It's so goddamn good. It's so funny. It's so like, there are so many laugh out loud moments. Trevor, you and I had an absolute blast seeing it in theaters. It was so
it's weird because we never did like like we never talked about it on the podcast.
No.
Because like we saw it I think right before you went to PAX,
Yeah.
or right before I went to
right before you went to your
I went
conference.
to my work conference. So I was out for a couple weeks, then you went to PAX, and so like it was basically that month during the summer where like we saw this movie and then didn't podcast for a month until and so by the time we came back, it was like, well, no point in really like diving into that one, but
it slaps on just about every level. Every casting is perfect. The teenagers they got to play the Mutant Ninja Turtles are so good. Each Ninja Turtle having kind of like their, not just their own personality quirk, but their own problems that come with their personalities or their issues. Whether it's Raph, who it's like, he's the angry one. It's like, well, he has anger issues like that he tries to deal with through physical exertion and activity. And he dreams of like doing contact sports at school. Like they all dream of going to school. They all dream of being regular teenagers, which is perfect because it's always been like, what's the real dynamic of the Ninja Turtles? And it's like, well, they're dudes with attitudes and whatnot. And they like pizza and skateboarding and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, this is such an in-depth character analysis of each of them. Like, Leonardo, who is a narc and an absolute, like, by the rules, like...
Leo's great. Don't shit.
I mean, I was going to say, I think Leo's the narc. Donnie in this, like, Leo's the one that, like, is ratting out everybody to Master Splinter.
Was the narc?
You said Donnie.
Oh, sorry, I meant Leo is the narc. Yeah. My bad. Sorry, I misspoke. Leo's the narc, but he's also like the rule enforcer and like the guys. I don't think we should be doing this kind of thing because he's not yet established himself as a leader among his brothers. And so this is very much a leaderless. Leo's story is about learning what it means to like step up and take leadership and to actually lead, not just by being the person who dad put in charge, but by actually like inspiring his brothers and focusing them on what they're good at. and helping them through that. Mikey, who hasn't really developed his humor yet, is super into improv, and it's bad. It's so bad, and it's so good because it's like, yeah, no, 14-year-old shouldn't be good at improv.
Right.
And then you have Donnie, who is super into weeb stuff, anime, technology. Like he's super nerdy. And there's a scene where he sees somebody, they go to the school at night and they see one of the lockers, somebody has like an Attack on Titan sticker on their locker. And Donnie freaks out because he's like, it's his first time interacting with anything that is in relation to any one of his interests that somebody else might actually share. Because his brothers don't share those interests. And it's obvious that he's just looking for somebody else to talk about these things with. April O'Neil as this just like quirky news girl who has performance anxiety. Like everybody's super incredibly relatable. As a man now entering his mid-30s, I totally get what Master Splinter is saying. It's hard to find somebody out there. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Like the way that it does the animation style, I will be the first person to admit, pretty off-putting at the initial, like from the initial go. But once you get into it, it works so well, and it helps characterize this movie in a way that I don't think another style could do it.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because it is an intentionally ugly like art animation style, but I think that works especially when you get into like all of the grotesque creatures that make up the mutant verse kind of thing, and everybody. It's like, yeah, seeing them in a cleaner art style would sanitize it for a bunch of characters that live in the sewers.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the griminess of it is a feature, not a bug, I think. I think, this movie, more than any other Turtles movie, nails the teenage aspect of it.
Yes.
And in a way that like many of them just don't even bother touching. As you kind of touched on, the fact that like all these actors are legit teenagers as they're recording these lines and stuff gives it such a fun, unique energy compared to any other version we've gotten before.
Oh, shut up. By the way, Donnie's voice actor was wearing a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure sweatshirt during a recording session, and that was the inspiration to make Donnie a giant weeb. He wasn't initially. That entire Attack on Titan scene that I referenced, completely made because the teenage actor is an anime fan. Nice. And so they decided to throw that in there. Like, this movie is of that caliber and that level of like fun, inspirational detail and like creating new things during production. It's so great.
Jackie Chan's Splinter being like a massive xenophobe against like and is protective not because he's looking out and doing what's best for the kids so much as like he hates the world above and is like trying to protect them from it is such a like a fun like quirk to that character that I've never thought of or associated Master Splinter with.
Oh yeah, but I mean, also like he has a very legitimate good reason.
He has his own trauma from his backstory that gets introduced. The wide net that they do in terms of casting like the rogues gallery of this movie. You have Seth Rogen obviously in there as Bebop. John Cena as Rocksteady is like just a fun dynamic between those two characters. But then I think Paul Rudd as Mondo Gecko steals the show a little bit in terms of like he's just trying to be a normal guy, while like Ice Cube is very much like the mastermind as Superfly.
Ice Cube as Superfly is one of the best castings ever because it's so good. And that art style leans into Superfly being this very aggressive, angry, violent mutant. And Ice Cube is literally at his like angriest and roughest for this. It's so good.
Yeah. Just lots of great stuff all around really in this one. And yeah, it was sad we didn't really get to talk about it more on the podcast just because of the timing of it all. But yeah, I had a ton of fun with this. I very much look forward to seeing whatever they do next with it. Because yeah, this was one of those, and it's very much, the other like great thing about this, and obviously I'm not the first to say anything like this, but the fact that this is doing something different animation wise is very much like it was given permission to do that because of like Spider-Verse and stuff like that. And it's not trying to be Disney, it's not trying to be DreamWorks, it's being its own thing and kind of taking big swings with its animation and just in a very great and fun way.
And it perfectly lands it. It's so good.
Yeah.
Another massive shout out is just the dynamic and chemistry between the turtle actors is so damn good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. I feel like I saw in behind the scenes stuff. So often in animation, people just go in and record their own lines, but I'm pretty sure all of the Turtles kids were in recording together.
Yep.
And you feel the energy of them playing off one another in the scenes, in such a great way.
Also, seeing the three just like pile on Leo for being a narc in one of the scenes is just so like emblematic of like, we had a deal, we weren't going to say anything to Dad, and then you narked on us, like, you suck.
Yeah. Similarly, I kind of made the allusion to it earlier, but like Leo ratting them out and Master Splinter being like, what have I told you about saying that word? And then them being like, sorry Master Splinter. Kind of like, yeah.
There's a lot more Dad Splinter moments than there are like Master Splinter moments.
Indeed, yeah.
Because as they reveal, he got them from videotapes.
Yes.
It's so good. The way they do it is just so great. And I'm also just a lot of the dynamic between the turtles, whether it's the milking scene or the ooh, like this is in the trailer, so this one is not a spoiler, but when April goes, so you guys were covered in slime? Oh, we prefer ooze. It slides off the tongue, ooze. And it's like so good.
Also, really a huge shout out to the action sequences in the animation of those, like the fight when all the turtles are going nuts with their fights and stuff, and especially like the big third act when they all really start working together and start working with other allies, expected and unexpected in the final sequence. That's I think where the cinematography and just choreography of a lot of those sequences really just chef's kiss.
Same thing with the like ugly, beautiful, like the beautifully ugly designs everything has.
Yeah.
Whether it's like the characters or it's like creatures or the architecture of New York City, it is beautifully, intentionally ugly, and it works so well.
Yep. So my number 6 is another one that I know we're going to circle back to because it's higher on Cam's list. But my number 6 was Wonka.
It is higher on my list.
So
it really? Interesting.
We will talk about it later. Then.
Okay.
That's one I knew because again, living with Cam, we saw that movie. I know he went and saw it with his family after the fact, and that movie very much vibes with Cam, so we will discuss it later when we get to it. So let's dive into our top 5s. Logan, hit me with your number 5.
My number 5 might still be higher. It is going to be Elemental.
It's my number 5 as well. So yeah, we'll go ahead and just talk about it here.
Elemental is great. If anything, me and Trevor had different reactions, and it's sort of funny because Trevor thought it was going to be one thing and then it was something else for him, and then he told me that it was that, and then I got something completely different out of it too. So there's also something to be said for, I think, the wonderful ways in which Elemental can tell its story and reach out to people. I think first thing out of the gate, it's such a visually arresting and like beautiful to look at film, and I love the way that they use, in particular, like the water effects and like the way that it moves and like goes through the cities. The entire design of the city, I think, is really cool, and like how it incorporates all the different elements. And then obviously get into the story itself, right? Like it is a first-gen immigrant story, which Trevor didn't expect, and that really worked for him. And it's a first-gen love story, which really worked for me. And yeah, I just think it's like really beautiful and like sincere and sweet without ever being too much of any of those things. I think the balance it strikes between, family and love and dreams and the obligations that are tied into all of these things, is really smart and really clever and really true. And I think there's been a run, and I feel like me and Trevor have talked a lot about these of movies from like Luca to Turning Red to now this that have kind of explored similar like immigrant story themes. And I think this is the one that works the best for me, and that works, which is maybe funny considering that they're elements, not even actual people, but I think there's like the biggest amount of like depth and humanity to them. And I think it is a story that is simultaneously universal and also so singular and so particular to these people's arcs and journeys throughout the city and with their families and with their own dreams. And I just think I was not prepared for how much I'd like it or even what the story is going to be necessarily. And I just had a great time with it. I think it's very sweet and very fun.
Yeah. As we touched on, there's another one that there's extensive already recording.
You can also we don't need
catch
to,
That D Plus
horse,
show on our episode of Elemental. But yeah, for me, this very much was seeing this like the same weekend that like The Flash came out. But seeing this with my family, that was a weekend where I saw The Flash with Cam, and then I went and saw Elemental with my family for like Father's Day, I think. And it like I was just blown away, much like with Strange World, where it was like, oh, like Disney did not market this in a way that like accentuated for me the really cool aspects of this story. And that was a just another kind of in their long run of like, oh, that's disappointing because like maybe if you tell people what this movie is, people go and see it or are more interested in going to see it or seeing because they might see themselves in it or something like that. And so, yeah, for me, it very much, it was much like Turning Red or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's not like, this isn't trying to touch on my experience or my story, but like, I love being exposed to those kinds of stories. And so this being very clearly like, you know, the Bernie and Cinder coming in as like the first fire people ever to this, you know, this place, just immediately hearkening to those, like, you know, all those stories that, you know, I would grow up with of like, you know, New Yorkers that didn't speak the language, came here with, you know, a prayer and a dream and made life work, and then, you know, grew a family and were able to give that family things. And so then you get that second generation and Ember like having not resentment toward like just guilt, the like second generation guilt of my dream isn't my parents' dream, but I feel like I need to because they've given up so much. They've like they put me first and foremost. I have to pay that back. And that's maybe a little bit more universal and not necessarily like unique to that experience, but I know it is incredibly more so in that experience than my experience ever would have been with that regard. So just seeing her then mixed with Wade's very much like Wade is effectively the white privilege character of this movie of like
very waspy vibes, right?
Like
affluent,
you know,
affluent white parents basically.
I'm pretty sure the first element in Element City was water, and so they're like the world is built for them, and like
again very wasp, very New England patrician wasp, right?
And like obviously they have the money and the status and all that stuff, and so like him being an interesting foil and love interest for Ember in that case was a beautiful thing to see. Great performances as well. And then above and beyond, this is like Pixar just continuing to knock it out of the park in terms of like the visual fidelity of everything. It's
beautiful. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's so very much it was, and I think I kind of originally described it as like it's like Zootopia. It's more like Zootopia than anything else, because it is like, oh, you go in expecting one thing, but like here's the like not very subtle message
social
that the movie's really trying to kind of get across. And so I loved it, and I was I was very excited to get to share it with you guys via that D Plus show, and equally excited that that it also resonated with both of you as well. Anything to add, Cam?
Yeah, I of course had it higher on my list, but really when it comes down to it, I love this movie.
Oh, it's higher on your list?
It was
lower,
number 8.
It was number 8.
9.
I meant higher in number,
9,
not in rank.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
It was my number 8.
Number 9.
Number 9, sorry. Yeah, it was my number 9 film. I love this movie. I think it's an absolute, like, fantastic, excellent film. One of the things that I think that you already touched on, Trevor, is this movie says a lot about ableism. And it says a lot about, it has a lot about, you know, the world not being built for certain people. And that's one of the biggest messages this film has, which is, and they never solve it. And it's kind of like not disappointing or sad, but like indicative of like, yeah, no, like the people who are different have to adapt and find a way to do that. And it's nonsense and it's BS, but you know, adapt, I guess. Like it's
assimilation.
Yeah, assimilation, basically. Like, but the idea that also speaks to like Wade being a bureaucrat and like coming in and being like, oh yeah, no, your dad's entire place where you live is quote unquote out of code. Well, out of code for who?
But yeah, and that's like there is a beautiful like the perseverance that like the fire people have in this world that very much is clearly not built for them. It is also a beauty, and just like the community that they have to make their life work and keep their traditions and keep their way of living alive while also finding their place in this world built for water people.
And not just that, but like the thing that the great danger of the movie, it happens to be infrastructure.
Yeah.
And like it's super low priority and people don't care about it because the only people it actually affects are the fire people who live in the old part of the city. Like, it's so like it has so much commentary about society and like the actual systemics of like if Zootopia was about overt racism in society and overt prejudice in society, Elemental's about the like actual systemic issues.
Institutional
and systemic issues of prejudice. And what really comes down to is the fact that people don't care. It's not that they're actively out there hating on fire people. They just don't care that fire people can literally be extinguished and killed by water. And they just don't care. And
they literally don't even think about them, right? And like what that says in its own way, right?
Wade doesn't even think about what it means to invite Ember over to his family's place. And Ember being like, I'm this amazing person that I can just hop to things and get to the dinner table anyway. And you can see like the discomfort on some members of the family's faces. They realize, oh, we didn't even think about this at all. And it's like, yep, that's WASP privilege right there. That is straight up white ass privilege. And this movie captures it. Another thing about it is also Wade is not a strong, manly man. He's incredibly, and it's not just water people are this way. It's just Wade's this way. And the fact that it's his empathy and his kindness.
His family is very clearly very emotional.
Yeah.
But it's not all water people.
Not all water, quote unquote, hashtag not all water people. Straight up, like his family is that way as well. They have the crying game, like which also is like another thing. As it's coming from a white family that has like inherent trauma built into our family practices. Like the crying game like spoke to me on a level I was not expecting.
But even that, like there's also a beauty in Ember obviously still being able to cry and still having that moment.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I was talking just about like in the family moment. But I think that what's really phenomenal about it is the way that like the way Wade is. Ember falls in love with Wade not because he is like a prototypical masculine heroic character. It's his empathy and his kindness and the fact that he isn't doing it like he initially doesn't start helping her because he loves her. He's doing it just because he's a kind person. He's a kind, empathetic person. And getting to know Ember, he realizes, is helping him grow as a person. And so he wants to embrace that relationship. And eventually it leads to like where they end up at the end of the movie. Yeah. And it's such a fun journey to see that relationship grow in a very non-typical way that you see in movies. It's really well done. Top to bottom, I love this film so much. I loved other movies more this year, but like it's just a solid film.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I'll say is I think the way in which it conveys and defies like I think heteronormative like stereotypes of what a relationship has to be, right, and who has to be what in the relationship, right. And I think the fact that Wade has much more, I think, what are classically described as like feminine qualities to Ember's much more masculine qualities, right? But I think the way that they still complement each other really well, right? And I think they each bring out something in the other that was always there, but maybe they didn't see in themselves. I think is really great. I think the moment like where they like touch and kiss and like the like prism effect that happens there is like beautiful on like a lot of different levels, both visually but also like from a story perspective, and like it's just like so impressive. And I think one of the things that I think this movie does really well is talk about the importance of like diversity, both in like diversity of like cultures, but also diversity of like perspectives and diversity of like abilities, like Cameron was kind of talking about, right? And like how the bureaucratic way that it kind of shuts off a lot of these avenues, right, and segregates these communities, while seemingly really positive because they each have their own way that they can navigate through the city and their own spot they can be in the city, in effect is also kind of enclosing them from being able to access easily the other areas of the city, right? And so in kind of very classic like 1940s 50s architecture, while seemingly trying to build something for everyone, it ends up just kind of segregating them all apart from each other. And I think the story, to Cameron's kind of point, is all about how like that infrastructure is what is dooming the city. And yeah, I just think it's just really well done. I agree.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out also to the Good Chemistry, which is like or it's the Disney Plus like 30 to 45 minute ish documentary kind of making of the movie, which is very much focusing around the director Peter Sohn and kind of his story. And it specifically goes into a scene that didn't really hit me as much first watching the movie. But like the context that they kind of discussed in there was like, oh, of course that's like why that is really important in there. And it's all of the stuff at like the flower that she, is super excited to see as a kid. And just the like the security guard basically being like, no fire people, get out of here. You're going to burn this place down or something like that. And it's like the first time she as a kid is really like introduced to just outright racism towards her in a way that like, of course that went over my head because I never had to experience that. I never had to feel that myself.
Oh, that hit me really hard. And the fact that Wade like helps her get to it is such a beautiful, because that's also like the moment where like they really start to fall in love. And so I think that kind of overshadows the impact of Wade is making something that she has lived her entire life thinking is impossible. He's making it possible.
Yeah.
And it's such a great moment. But yeah, it does overshadow the overt racism that she faces as a child.
Exactly. And so like that's when I watched it, it was like, oh, that's a beautiful like moment for their characters. But also I think you probably could have cut that out and they still have enough great like interrelationship moments that like they still work. And it's more about him helping her overcome and confront the like deep-seated trauma of that first really racist experience where she learned that she wasn't like other people and that kind of thing.
It's about healing trauma.
Yeah. that like them kind of highlighting and focusing on that sequence in the behind the scenes documentary helped shine a new light on it for me in the context of the film itself. So yeah, shout out to that if you want a little supplemental bit for Elemental. But yeah, so that's mine and Logan's number 5. So Cam, hit us with your number 5.
It's got to be higher up on Logan's list. I guarantee Oppenheimer.
Yep. Okay. Then we will talk about it when we get there. And we've already talked about my number 5, Elemental. So we will switch over to number 4s. Logan, hit me with your number 4 movie of 2023.
My number 4 is going to be Asteroid City.
the third movie that came out the weekend of Elemental and The Flash, as we've touched on in many of that D Plus show this year. So yeah, tell us about Asteroid City there, Logan.
I don't need to say a lot on Asteroid City.
It's a Wes Anderson movie. If you've seen one, you've seen a lot.
It's a Wes Anderson movie. It's in some ways maybe the most Wes Anderson a movie can possibly be. It's very Wes Anderson. I cannot emphasize that enough. And in some ways, it's actually not my favorite Wes Anderson movie. I think there are other of his movies that work more for me, but it was funny to kind of go see it with like a group of like three people who were all big Wes fans in Austin, and I was probably the coolest on it. Having said that, I think it's still a Wes Anderson movie. So sort of like I was talking about for Mission Impossible, you're grading on a hell of a curve, right? Even a not great Wes Anderson movie is still really good. And kind of a recurring theme of some of these movies, visually, it's just beautiful, right? I could just look at it and like the fact that he's using like actual like background sets a la like Barbie-esque kind of thing in like old school like 1950s movies is really well done. It's a very Inception-y movie, so it's like a story within a story within a story, and then you're kind of having like these breaks, like the actors are like breaking character and like walking across the stage, and it's very, very, very meta, in a way that is sort of deliberately confusing, but also kind of poetic, and like kind of the climax is like a perfect example of like where it's like breaking like through the fourth wall into like the fifth wall. It's like two tiers of breaking, but it's great. And like Margot Robbie has like a really, 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 really lovely cameo, and maybe the best sequence of the movie, certainly up there for me. But throughout, the cast is so good. Scarlett Johansson is phenomenal, and it might be the best thing I've seen her in years. Tom Hanks is really good as like the father-in-law character. Jeffrey Wright is really good as a general on the scene. Adrian Brody's here because it's a Wes Anderson movie. Bryan Cranston's funny as kind of the narrator to the play of the movie. And yeah, I just think Wes Anderson has this ability to write dialogue in sort of a Aaron Sorkin-esque way that I think just flows kind of so well, almost like lyrics on a song sheet, right? And I am just constantly riveted by it, right? I feel like I can just listen to his character speak. And yeah, I think it's weird and it's meta and it's Inception-y and it's fourth wall breaking and it kind of shouldn't work and it's really messy, but it mostly does. And, you know, it's basically, the whole movie is basically a bottle episode where they just can't escape this place. And it works really well. And it's interesting to compare it to other stuff like Isle of Dogs or Fantastic Mr. Fox or like a Rushmore, Royal Tenenbaums, or Grand Budapest Hotel, which is maybe my personal favorite of his. And I think how kind of grandiose those can be at times. And here it's much more insular, but also very philosophic. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it. If you're a Wes Anderson fan, you will like it in some degree. If you're not a Wes Anderson fan, you should watch it anyway. Whatever, you know, it's an hour and 50-minute, 2 hour long movie, but it's a great, you know, fun, esoteric ride. And so, yeah, Asteroid City is my number 4.
Nice. Yeah, it's one that like I kept seeing and contemplating sitting down and watching, and I just never got.
I think you would. I would think you would either really like it, Trevor, or I think you'd really not like it. And I think there's no middle option for you.
I feel like it's the case with most Wes Anderson movies. You either really like them or you don't get them at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say I actually tend to be like in the middle ground on Wes Anderson. Like,
I love Wes Anderson.
When I watch him, like I'm thinking the ones I've seen the most recently would be like Isle of Dogs, or
Isle of Dogs is so good.
I watched The French Dispatch during the pandemic and stuff.
Okay. That's a quirky one, yeah.
And it's very much like I know going into it, I'm gonna get great performances from a bevy of great actors.
Oh yeah,
I'm not gonna care about the story, like both with Isle of Dogs and French Dispatch. Like there's a lot of like we're gonna do vignettes rather than tell like a full story.
That's very present here too.
Yeah, and that's kind of like
I think a more seamless way here than it is in French Dispatch, but still present.
yeah,
Here.
it's like there's always going to be like some connective tissue in them and stuff, but it's like it's not going to be just a straightforward like narrative of these things. So it's one and yeah, I mean like visually it looked incredibly gorgeous and like all this stuff and like I like the style of I like the shooting style, I like the visual style of Wes Anderson, and but it is just like I know I'm going to watch this and think I'm not smart enough to be watching this, or there's a whole bunch of stuff true. Like realistically it's going to be like more like I'm plenty smart. There's just a lot of stuff that's going over my head on this one.
Yeah. I think what I would say, knowing that, Trevor, is that if you haven't seen it, I think the Wes Anderson movie that could be the most for you, that I think you would really enjoy, would be Moonrise Kingdom.
That is, I think, the one I like the most. Yeah, I have seen that one.
I think that one I think it's just a straight narrative story, and I also think it's just like a really beautiful story. And so, yeah, that would make sense that would be, or Grand Budapest, I think, which is also, I think, less vignette-y. But Moonrise Kingdom is just like beautiful. It's such a great story.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Solid number 4 from you there. Cam, hit me with your number 4 movie of the year.
My number 4 movie of the year is Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
That is still higher on my list.
Fair enough.
So we will circle that, and I know my number 4 is going to be higher on somebody else's list because my number 4 is Barbie.
It's higher on my list.
Yeah. There we go.
Make that a clean sweep on that one.
Excellent. So yeah, once. In this, just on the topic of Barbie, before we move on to number 3s, I'll say that in going to like my larger kind of like tiering of ranking, Barbie, Elemental, and Wonka are the great movies I saw this year. Those are the ones that fall in like the 8s range.
Wow, you guys both like Wonka more than I did.
Yeah. So yeah, let's swing over to number 3. Right back to you, Logan. What's your number 3 movie of the year?
Probably the last movie on any of our lists that only one of us has seen. My number 3 movie is Air.
Okay.
With Matt Damon and Ben Affleck.
When Cameron mentioned Tetris earlier, I was like, Air's also out there in that like, hey, we made a movie about a brand or about a thing this year. There's also Blackberry out there that I heard very good things about.
Yeah, I thought of Blackberry as well.
But hit me with your thoughts on Air.
I think Air is phenomenal. I think it isn't like easily like the great tier for me. I think, sort of like the classic like journalist newspaper like Shoe Gum stories, right? Like Spotlight, like All the President's Men. It's sort of just like about the inner workings of something. In this case, like sort of signing Michael Jordan to Nike and launching Air Jordans. I don't even know where to start. Like Ben Affleck is great as Phil Knight, right? Like the founder of Nike, suitably like frustrated and foul-mouthed. Matt Damon as Sonny Vaccaro is also fantastic, right? It's kind of the main force of the film. Maybe my favorite character in the whole movie, who's just sort of like in it and like burst, is Michael Jordan's agent, who's got one of the most like foul-mouthed, like curse-filled roles I've seen in a movie in a long time, but is so good.
It's Chris Messina, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, from the Indie Project. Yeah. And
I've seen enough about Air to like know that he's like a standout performance and kind of had that
so
character.
Good. He's so good and like so just like furious and rage filled on like every phone call he's got. It's even better because he like never is like almost never. There's like one exception, but like interacting with other people like face to face. It's just like all phone calls, and they're so good. And I just am a sucker for these kind of stories, right? Like I love Spotlight. I adore All the President's Men. And this sort of fits into that mold. And I think it is sort of insane, right? Like it's sort of an insane story that's like that is true, that actually happened, right? Like it shouldn't have worked. Like it was such a weird, crazy, like division defining bet by like Sonny and Phil Knight and Nike to like bet their shoe brand on Michael, who was just like a kid out of college at the time, hadn't played a single college basketball game, and to make him like the entire brand was kind of insane. It was even more insane that they just happened to pick the person who'd become the greatest basketball player of all time, arguably the defining athlete of the 20th century, maybe the defining athlete of all time, right? Like, it's like there's so many like things that had to just work so well. Michael shouldn't really have signed with Nike. It didn't really make any sense. He didn't want to at all, right? Like, it was like his like third option, and it didn't really make any sense. He was going to not get as much money. But it's just because like it could just be him, right? He could define the whole thing. And the way that it like transformed the industry with like MJ getting, very importantly, like the royalties from Air Jordan too, and how that like transformed the shoe sales and just like merchandising sales going forward. It just wasn't a thing that was done, right? And then it is how it is done now, right? And has how, you know, obviously made Michael Jordan a billionaire, who could own his own basketball team, right? And like, it's just a lot of fun. It's, you know, a great like foul-mouthed R-rated movie, like gumshoe kind of stuff. The cast works really well together. Viola Davis is Michael's mom, gives a great Viola Davis performance, like you'd imagine, right? There was like Oscar buzz for her, and she's really good at it. And I like her and sort of everyone together. Actually, I was going to say in like Sunny together, but she's great with everyone. And like the film does a thing of like shying away from like looking at Michael, right? Like not really getting a good glimpse at him. And yeah, I just think it's great. Like, it's just a great movie. It's a great sports film that's not really a sports film. And yeah, so it is my number 3 movie of the year.
Excellent. Solid pick. Cam, hit me with your number 3.
My number 3 is Wonka.
All right. Well, let's
That's
talk about Wonka.
Let's do it. Yeah. Wild different reactions.
I'm going to read off the first line that I wrote here for the blog. It's, who can take a concept nobody wanted and turn it into gold? Paul King. If you had ever asked me at the beginning of this year if I gave 2 shits about Wonka, I would have said not even. Did not care about this movie coming out. It looked fine. I'm not the biggest Willy Wonka person in the world. I enjoyed the books when I was a kid. I never felt super attached to the Gene Wilder film. The Tim Burton Wonka film was like fine at the time. That when it came out, I was like, oh, this is cool. And then over time, of course, it's like it's gotten super dated and bad in so many different ways.
I wonder how much of like your opinion on this movie depends on those other things, because
I was going to say
I grew up with like the Gene Wilder as like a staple, and it was like a regularly played. I hate the Tim Burton Willy Wonka, like Tim Burton Johnny Depp. That is just a god awful piece of crap movie.
For me, it's I grew up with Willy Wonka entirely because I'm the only person in my family who doesn't care for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Mm-hmm. But then again, like I was a shitty kid who thought bright colors were dumb, and like I've never been a big candy person. So like it's not like my dream. I've never had the dream of like owning a chocolate factory or chocolate rivers. A lot of that was like sanitary issues. As growing up as a kid with like mental disability, it was like not ideal. Like a lot of questions I had about this movie were like, okay. And then, you know, as an adult now it's like, I didn't have it back then, but I really wish I'd been like, isn't there a labor issue with all these Oompa Loompas? And he's like hiring, outsourcing and avoiding unions. I wish I'd been that kid and not just the chocolate river going through dirt and stuff. Oh, gross. I don't want to eat that chocolate. Like that was the kid I was. So, but yeah, and it's just, and I also saw it as like this grown man is just bullying these children, not understanding like the kind of like social, like the whole like symbolic nature of all of it. Like I got that later when I read the book and like through like actual proper like literary analysis of it. Mm-hmm. And then I appreciated the Gene Wilder movie a bit more, but at the same time, it's never been like my favorite musical or film. I think it's pretty iconic. I think that it has a lot of like, I think it's very cinematography wise. I think it's like really brilliantly shot in certain ways. Mm-hmm. But there's just always been like I've just never been super attached to it. And then Wonka came out and I've completely rethought and reframed my entire thought process on the entire Wonka franchise of like the original film, the Johnny Depp version, and then like this one. And I'm like, I've had so much thought put into this movie and like what it does and how it does. But I really have to say, I think this movie needs to be seen twice to really appreciate it fully. Because knowing what's coming next and then being able to kind of see the threads. One of the things I love about this movie is that its soundtrack is taking the song Pure Imagination.
We'll get to it.
And taking it and pulling chords and notes from it and like sewing them into other songs and the other orchestral moments in ways that are like really beautiful and really poignant. I feel like there is a great look at, I think this movie takes a very positive approach. After talking to Trevor about it, Trevor's like, you should really watch the Paddington movies then, because Paul King's really your style, apparently. And I wasn't expecting that either. But like the way and the approach of this movie and the way that it brought a lot of joy and happiness, and the soundtrack I think is wonderful. I really enjoy the songs. I listened to them I listened to the soundtrack, and it's so wonderful. I don't think I like Timothée Chalamet as an actor in general. And so I did not find it egregious that he is playing Willy Wonka. I think some people have a lot of people have if it's not Gene Wilder, I don't want it. And I just don't think that's never going to happen. He's dead, folks. And another thing too, it's I just don't know what people expect it to be then.
I mean, they don't want this to exist is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, that's just not going to happen. So deal with it, losers. I don't care. I really love this movie. It came out of seeing it the second time. It was already in my top 10, but it was number 9. And then seeing it again with my family over the Christmas holiday was seeing it with my nieces and nephews and having so much fun with the songs and everything about it. It just was I just felt so attached to this movie throughout after the 2 times seeing it that I've just been really wowed by it. There are so many moments that I feel are stellar. And one of my favorite moments is a moment where it has to do with balloons, the zoo, and dancing on top of buildings. And it's one of the most magical moments of the film. And I feel like it does such a really cool job. And I think this movie really does get better upon repeated viewings. I think that there's a lot of nuance in this film that is lost the first time that you see it. One of which is I didn't realize the music in the soundtrack had those notes of Pure Imagination thrown in them. And not just thrown in them, but those notes spawn different musical pathways through the songs and cause different songs to come from those. And on top of that, I just think it has a brilliant cast. It has a really stellar cast from its supporting actors and actresses to, I think Timothée Chalamet does even if you are not a big fan of Timothée Chalamet, I think he does a serviceable job for being this young, naive, and optimistic Wonka versus the old, jaded asshole you get in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But you see the beginnings, and I love how they're hey, how does the magic, there's just magic in this movie. And there's just magic. He pulls shit out of his hat, and it's is it magician, sleight of hand, or is it actually magic? He's doesn't matter. It's happening. Whatever is happening, and it's great, and it's wonderful. And milking a giraffe happens in this movie. It's great. Every time I think about this movie, I'm that's okay. And then it's yeah, okay.
All right. And on that note, I'm going to throw it to you, Logan, for your Wonka thoughts. Because you did have this, not in your top 10, but you did mention it was an honorable mention for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important, and Trevor sort of alluded to this, to give context, right, to the different experiences, right? I mean, I really like the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka film. I really love that movie. Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka is one of my favorite performances and characters I most remember from my childhood of just really loving. And so, I remember being 12 or 13 years old when the Johnny Depp one came out, being like, we don't need this. We already have it, right? So I've been on the we don't need another one of these movies for 20 years train. And I sort of felt the same way about this one. If this is at least like different and not just like kind of like a remake, I think it's weird, right? I think there are elements I really like. I think Olivia Colman is great as she is in literally everything she does. And I think a lot of the cast kind of around Timothée Chalamet is good. But this is a movie so firmly placed on his shoulders, so it's going to come down to how well Timothée Chalamet does or not, because everyone else just doesn't really matter. It's just his movie, and I think he does good, right? I like Timothée Chalamet. He's just not really Wonka, right? Is sort of the issue that runs into it for me, right? Like he is just a completely different human being than Willy Wonka is in Gene Wilder or even Johnny Depp's performance, right? Like he's just like they're just like different. They're just different people. It's not even like he's not like that person yet because he's got like 20 or 30 years, whatever. Like they're just different people. Like they were like the funny like Instagram things like, how does like this person become this person? The answer is like he doesn't, right? They're just completely different human beings. And like if you're down for that ride, then that's chill. But like it's just like not a Willy Wonka movie, but they wanted to make a Willy Wonka movie and their own version, which is fine. I think some of the musical numbers really work for me really well. I think some of them work less so. I think Hugh Grant, as he's prone to do, steals basically every single scene he's in, because Hugh Grant is also great, as we will talk about eventually whenever we get to the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I think the movie's ending is okay to me. It sort of feels like they didn't really know how they wanted it to end a little bit at the end. And I think it's actually maybe one of the weaker parts of it for me. I think everything that's kind of up to that, I liked a little bit more. And I like its usage of pure imagination at the end, which is something I was maybe the most protective of, because I think Gene Wilder's performance of Pure Imagination, I think, is just like full stop one of the best like performances of like any like song in any movie ever. I think it's like actually just like one of the most beautiful things just to listen to. It's like poetry in motion. And this doesn't obviously have the same like resonance and kind of like, I think, themes of like melancholia and like hope that one I think combines together so well in Gene Wilder's hands. But I still think it does like a good job of using that song, and like Cameron said, like the usage of it throughout the movie I immediately caught up on because I adore Pure Imagination. I think ultimately like my issues are not that the movie's bad. I think the movie's good. I like it. I think it's just more like there are movies I enjoyed more, and it just is not the same level of kind of, I think, insanity and dark humor and really smudgy dark optimism and hope that are laced throughout the original Willy Wonka one. And Timothée Chalamet, who's an actor I like a lot actually, is just not Gene Wilder. They're just two very different performers doing two very different things. But it's still good. I by no means hate this movie. Don't like it. And I think if people do, that's probably a little silly. It's very fun. It's very, very Paul King. It is a very Paul King movie. If maybe not my favorite of his, but it's good. I mean, I just love the first one so much. I think that this is just not that, and it's also they're very different, right? Like that's like the thing. Like this is just a much more hopeful, optimistic, happy movie than the first one ever even pretends to be. Right. And Gene Wilder is just something very different than Timothée Chalamet is, but that doesn't mean that they're both not good. I just have a very much a stronger affinity for the first one. Trevor, what about you?
Yeah, so like I said, this was my number 6, so I kind of fall in between you two, basically, in terms of like my rankings for it. And I very much, when this got announced, I was like, this is another one of those that like we don't need.
Right.
It doesn't need to exist. But A few things kind of turned me around even before seeing the movie on it. One, obviously, the Paul Kingness, and like I've only seen Paddington 2 of the Paddingtons, but like Paddington 2, absolutely a charming movie. I get why everybody loves it, and why, shout out Ben Bellevue, and why people go nuts about it. And and if I would want anybody to make this movie, it would have been him, because I think he approaches it like Wonka strikes me as a movie that was made very cynically from Warner Brothers. Here's an IP we have. Let's make a prequel movie and throw a name in it. And Paul King pulls the cynicism out of what could have been a much worse movie. The other thing, even as we're talking about it, it's really gotten cemented more. But I love Wicked, and so I like. Oh, sure. I think the prequel of an established character is a fun enough idea if done right. And I think Wonka is one that, yes, as you kind of touched on, Logan, the Wonka that ends this movie has a large journey to get to the Wonka that starts Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And maybe they'll do sequels and whatnot to like help start to bridge that gap.
It's a movie that's going to have a sequel necessarily.
Yeah. But yeah, like I walked out of this one, I was like, well, based on how this one ends, there's like some really dark things have to happen to get to sad Willy Wonka, who has like become a recluse at the beginning of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But the like another thing that I saw prior to this one was like a Timothée Chalamet interview, kind of where he was like, yeah, I wanted to do this because I'm not making this movie for the fans of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I'm making this movie for kids now that like can grow up and enjoy the magic and whimsy of that character in this movie, and also will enjoy, that movie. It's like he was excited to be the character and be in a magical kind of story that he hasn't necessarily gotten to do in his more dramatic lines of work and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, that's like, yeah, it is a very much, I'm not necessarily the target audience for this. There's still a lot for me to enjoy in it. And obviously there is an element just innately in, if you're making this very specifically as a prequel to that movie, it has a tie to that movie. But yeah, if your main goal is to like be a magical movie to like bring new children into this magic and wonder, cool, great. Shout out, we gave him some love earlier, but shout out to Keegan-Michael Key, again, knocking it out of the park in this movie in a very fun and memorable role as like the chocolatey corrupt police chief. I love the chocolate cartel. The chocolate cartel. Who of the three of them, I think I really only knew Matt Lucas before. But the guy playing Slughorn is deliciously like evil, and they have fun with that. Yes,
he throws a baby down a laundry chute.
Yeah,
that's true.
It doesn't have the dark, twisted bite of the river from hell that they go through in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory kind of stuff, and who knows what we're doing, where are we coming, are we going, whatever. That whole thing is wild. But yeah, it does have Hugh Grant as an Oompa Loompa who has been following Timothée Chalamet around for years because he stole Coco.
It's great.
Hugh Grant having a wonderful like third act of his career, just having a lot of fun in goofy roles, since he's not going to be the like romantic, lead in a film anymore. I loved the little collection of like other workers. Yeah, Olivia Colman, as you touched on, always fun, a so blast good. In this, as the very like mustache twirly evil kind of person. But I loved the like the cast of characters under her employ, under her forced servitude, including the butler from Downton Abbey.
I knew that. Yes,
it's always fun seeing him pop up and stuff. Jim Carter, and then I'm the end of the movie being kind of heist like in, all right, we've got the team together and here's how we're gonna, break in and do all the things. Shout out to the Rowan Atkinson fun little Mr. Bean-esque cameo. This has absolutely the Paul King whimsy and charm to it, from top to bottom. And so, yeah, even if the songs didn't work as well for me as they did for Cam, there was still a smile on my face throughout this movie. I had a very.
I would
good
love
time
to
with
see
it.
you watch Paddington 1 and 2 now, Cameron, because I think I'll have a great time.
I think I will too. I was very much like pure joy and optimism. I don't need that in my life. When people were talking about Paddington 2 being like the best movie of all time, talking about when Ben was trying to tell us that it was the best movie of all time, and I was like, where's the cynicism? Where's the nihilism?
Ben Bellevue's not alone. Again, this is a whole plot point in Underworld of Massive Talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, in that one, it's very specifically like one of Nicolas Cage's, or is it Nicolas Cage or Pedro Pascal? It's Pedro Pascal's one of his
but
like
then he gets it to
favorite
Nicolas Cage,
three, one of his top 3 movies. And Nicolas Cage is very like, what are you talking about? But by the end of the movie, he turns around on it. Yeah.
I'm very much Nicolas Cage in that aspect. I think I'm going to turn around and be like, I really love these Paddington movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like they are a movie that like will break through your cynicism. As they did mine.
I think.
I mean, this movie broke through my cynicism.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, Paddington to me, because obviously that's more of like a UK thing, but like I view it as just like analogous to like Winnie the Pooh, right? Like it's just like there's something like warm and comforting, I think, to like those characters, right? And like whether it's Winnie or Tigger or Eeyore, that kind of stuff, and I think Paddington has very similar vibes, and that's obviously here too. I mean, one thing I did want to say to Trevor on a point he made, right, of like Timothée Chalamet being like, this is for people who like can't watch or handle the like more emotional moments in the first, and so like we made this one like it's a weird balance to strike, right? Because like it reminds me of a like quote Timothy Dalton gave like probably like 15 years after he was done being James Bond, where he was just kind of talking about like his time as Bond and how like kind of controversial and how much like hate and shit he got. And he was talking about how like a parent, was saying like, I couldn't take my like 6-year-old boy here. And he was like, well, maybe these movies were never made for a 6-year-old child to go to, right? It's like a ruthless killer. And it's like, Willy Wonka is not James Bond in that regard, but it is a thing of like, well, maybe like the movie's just not for them yet then, right? And you just wait and like you don't necessarily need to make something like this. It's a tough balancing act, I think.
Just say what you want to say, Logan. Just say fuck them kids.
Look, we already talked about Michael Jordan once this podcast. We can talk about him again here. Michael Jordan, fuck them kids, right? Like, my favorite story about Michael Jordan. But like, I think, it is a movie that I do enjoy. And Shravia liked it more than I did even. So maybe in the greatest irony of all, the most like optimistic, happy-go-lucky of all of us is the one who's most down in the movie. But ultimately, I like Trevor worded it really well. Just like the twisted darkness, I think, of the original Wonka is just really something special. Like there's just really like nothing like that Willy Wonka movie. Like it's so weird. It shouldn't work and it does.
Yeah, it adds like a layer. It adds an extra layer that puts that over the top a little bit in terms of that original movie.
But this is still great.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts from you, Cam? As this was your number 3 movie of the year.
Number 3.
My number 3 movie.
This was your number 3. I'm
saying, my number.
Do you have any final thoughts to wrap us up on this?
I was about to get into that. Sorry about that. I misspoke when I started. The only thing I'll say is that you wait the entire movie to hear Pure Imagination, and then when you do, it's one of the most poignant moments. But there's a moment before that honestly I knew was coming the second time I watched it, and I teared up even more than I did the first time we watched it. It was at the chocolate fountain scene. Even just thinking about it's like getting me kind of choked up. There's something very magical about the very quiet, impactful moments of this movie that I just resonated really heavily with me and make me even now just thinking about it makes me like choke up a little bit.
What's the chocolate fountain scene?
Some where he opens
he opens the
Wonka bar, his mother's Wonka bar.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And looks up.
I was like, I thought you were talking about the scene where like they like got in like the bubbles and like flew in the air, and I was like, that made you get. I was like,
yeah. The thing I'll say, and that it's a disappointing aspect of seeing enough movies or seeing enough trailers and stuff. Like, I had seen that shot in the trailer, so in the back of my mind, I know that's coming still somewhere down the line. So it robs that moment for me from having the impact that it had with you, Cam.
Yeah, because I didn't see a single, like, I didn't really pay attention to any trailers for Wonka.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think I'm somewhere in between Trevor and Cam on this, where I hadn't necessarily seen that particular show, or I'm sure I have, but I didn't like remember it. For me, it was a thing of like, obviously we were building to something with that, the whole movie. And so for me, when we got there, they had like their like few brief words, and he like read the note and it said what it said. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it, like didn't have the emotional moment like hit like I want to. It was like, oh, okay, that was just kind of it, right? And like I almost like wanted to like really hit me harder than it did. And so I was like, I got them like, oh, okay, yeah, that was nice.
Yeah.
Like Pure Imagination hit me way harder than that.
Well, yeah. So, but the fact that leads into Pure Imagination is just like, I'm just crying the end of that film, just crying during it. It's just, it hits on just about every level of like emotional, like easy emotional beats to get Cameron to cry. It's nailing like half of them, like just absolutely nailing it. And then just ends with that peppy, which is playing under the dialogue between Hugh Grant and Timothée Chalamet. That leads into the rest of Pure Imagination afterwards. There's like this quick interlude of just this like but like the steady like peppy beats that's like it's holding back the rest of all the happiness. It's barely holding it back, and then it like slowly lets it flow out as they then do the rest of the ending of the movie, and it's magical, and I love it, and I adore this movie so much. So
Excellent.
Trevor.
So my number 3. As we're here and I'm looking at two movies that I imagine are Cameron's number 2 and number 1, I'm thinking, Cameron, did you not include Suzume on your list? Because Suzume is my number 3.
I forgot to mention it as an honorable mention. I apologize.
Oh, an honorable mention for
It's
you?
an honorable mention for me.
Okay. I definitely would have thought that you had that higher. So Suzume, and technically, this is the other like out I would have given you. Technically, Suzume came out in 2022, but it didn't come to the West here until 2023.
It counts.
So yeah, Cam and I went and saw this together. This is by the same director of Your Name and Weathering
so
with You.
Dungeons and Dragons in your top 2 then.
Yeah, yep. Yes. So yeah, this is Makoto Shinkai. And the biggest thing I'll say about this movie is it has made me rethink how I view the world. Not like all the time or anything like that, but like one of the core kind of central themes and ideas of this movie is like abandoned places and like.
Just to be clear, this is an anime.
Yeah,
It's an anime.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Beautifully made. It's incredible.
Oh, I'm sure. I just want to make sure before we get further into that what I'm
Yep.
looking at here. Okay.
And so yeah, in this kind of the main character Suzume and goes on this adventure, and like the trials she has to overcome tend to be centered around places that like time and people have forgotten. There's like an abandoned the first one is like an abandoned onsen, an abandoned spa, and then there's like an abandoned amusement park. And it wasn't until like talking about the movie with Cameron afterwards, when we were talking about it on the podcast, that because it was one of those things I was like, I don't really think about those kinds of things because I feel like I don't really like, there aren't those places in like our society. And then like, as we're talking about it, I'm like, wait, what am I talking about? I go by like, abandoned strip malls all the time that have like Family Dollar. That's just like, you can see where that sign used to be and now it's just gone because now it's empty. Or the malls around town that don't exist anymore. Big Surf, which was like a water park right down the street from where I used to live, closed during the pandemic and is just gone now. But it was like a staple of my childhood and all that stuff.
It was such an incredibly important part of my childhood as well.
And so it's that idea of like, oh, these are like, that's what I mean when I say like I look at the world differently, because now I pass by those places and I notice them a little bit more than I maybe did previously. And so it's just, I mean, it's a beautiful story and beautifully animated, beautiful characters. One of the characters is like gets like transformed into a stool, like a three-legged chair, and so that ends up being like a whole thing.
So the animation is so cute.
It's anime as fuck, but it's beautiful and charming, and and the places that the story goes are like surprised me in fun and interesting ways. But like the thing that will last with me is ultimately like the conversation I had with Cam after the fact on the podcast, where like I'm realizing in real time just how many like abandoned and forgotten places exist. And like, I mean, one of the big ones I highlighted in that episode was I grew up going to like a little dude ranch kind of thing in the White Mountains every year. I would go there for like a week with my aunt and grandmother, and my sister and I would go, and basically it'd be like a week away and kind of away from technology and stuff. We'd go fishing. There was like a little rec room kind of area where we would play like pool and listen to the jukebox and stuff like that. But there was like no TV, you know. Apart from Game Boys in later years, we didn't have like Nintendo or anything with us, and it was very much like that's where I would play Pinochle with my grandma and aunt all the time. We would play games of Monopoly. We would take in like the four, you know, in the sedan or the Oldsmobile or whatever we kind of drove up there. It would be like the four of us in the car, and in between my sister and I, a giant igloo cooler with what was largely going to be our food for the week, because we might do like a trip or two into town to pick up more groceries and stuff. But it was like just a week we were going to go and kind of be away from a little bit of stuff. And down the road, like that place in and of itself could kind of be, or was more or less one of these places when we were there. It's a place that like my parents and my mom and aunt went to with my grandmother and grandpa growing up. And so it was kind of like they're continuing the family tradition. But like when they were going in the 70s, it was like packed, and it, like the place was full all summer. By the time my family's going in, you know, in the 90s, occasionally there would be a second family there the week we were there. But there were plenty of times where like we were in one of the cabins, and the other 30 cabins on the property were empty. But further down the road, there was an even more abandoned one of those places that had been completely overgrown. It's called like Canyon Cove or something like that. We just discovered it like off the road one day, and like went in and were like exploring and just seeing like the graffiti and all the, you know, all the kind of burnt out or you know, deconstructed kind of still framework of like the cabins and stuff like that, but like obviously had been long abandoned and stuff. And so it was this movie like recontextualize those things and kind of there's like a fantastical element to, you know, the story around those places, and, you know, the stories that no longer exist at those places, and so yeah, there's just like a beauty to that, a similar to talking about Wonka a little bit, a melancholic beauty to the tragedy of those places, and with a whole bunch of other anime bullshit on top of it, but wonderful and delightful. Yeah, there's a talking cat that's secretly a god or something like that. I don't remember the specifics and the details there, but yeah, it is
it's like a shitty spirit. It's a piece of shit spirit.
Yeah, much like with the previous one that I'd seen, Weathering with You. I've still not seen Your Name. I have it, I believe, but I've just never actually sat down and watched it, which is like the one that everybody like raves about. But Weathering with You was the first of his that I saw, and it is very much like it's like my relationship to these movies kind of ends up being the relationship I hear a lot of people kind of talk about with the Studio Ghibli movies, in terms of like the fantastical nature of the animation and the stories and stuff like that.
Well, these movies are still much more like realistic and like based in society.
And that's, these are modern fantasy is how
urban fantasy,
these are all, urban fantasy is how they're all kind of like posed as, versus a lot of Ghibli stuff that is more, wild and fantastical and stuff. But yeah, Suzume, my number 3 for this year. Cam, anything to add? Since I know you saw it, you just have it as an honorable mention.
It's an honorable mention for me. I think it's an incredibly beautiful film. I think it might be like on my lower end of his movies. I still thought it was excellent. I think that the way in which he takes mundanity, the idea of like this idea of mundane things like abandoned places, and brings fantastical elements to them, is something that's really, really special. And I think that it hits on an incredibly deep level, especially as the film goes on, and the main character is pulled more and more into this fantastical thing. It's not like, oh, I'm part of this fantastical world now. It's wonderful. It's like, it's a journey for her to go on of development and expectations of like what she's going to do with her life and a lot of like other deeper things. But it really hits a lot of notes. I am a little surprised it's your number 3, but I think it's just the fact that like it kind of came, like the way it connected to you in post.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't recognize how deeply that affected you.
Yeah.
And I have to, I've always noticed those things. Part of that is like just growing up in Mesa. A lot of things change from when you talk about abandoned places, I will never forget for for half of my life, the Alma School and Southern, shopping complex that was there was like fenced off because of like legal issues of trying to sell the land and everything for like a good 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Atomic Comics used to be. That's where like a lot of like shopping used to be in that area.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is like, I've driven by all these kinds of places my entire life here, be it, on trips out to Mesa or even here in Scottsdale and stuff like that. It's like, but I just drove past them. And this movie really helps be like, hey, like those places have a story.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be abandoned and empty. So yeah, that was just kind of
I thought it was excellent.
It hit me in a much deeper way than I initially expected. And so as I was reflecting back on the movies of the year, not only is this one beautiful and incredible animation, but it just
keeps age appropriate relationships in mind.
Sure, that resonated with me more than a lot of these other movies did. So that was my number 3. So yes, let's dive over into our number 2s. Logan, hit me with your number 2 movie of the year.
My number 2 movie is Oppenheimer.
All right, then let's dive into Oppenheimer.
And we don't need to.
As I alluded to, I did not see it, so so it is just you and Cameron holding this one down.
And we don't need to go into super crazy in-depth conversations. We've talked about it before, but I think Oppenheimer is really great. I mean, right? I mean, I think it's really, really great. I think Cillian Murphy and RDJ get a lot of the credit and praise for this movie and the performances, and those are both really stellar. I think Emily Blunt is who I also want to give a shout out to, because I think she, in playing kind of the archetypal, like long-suffering wife, you would assume she doesn't get a lot to do, but she does so much with the sequences and moments and scenes she has, and particularly like her ability to convey like emotional frustration and anguish and despair purely through like her face and like not even necessarily with any dialogue, I think is incredible, and particularly in like the interrogation scenes.
It's her forehead. Her forehead delivers so much in this movie, and
she is doing so much with just almost nothing to work with, and it's great. I think Matt Damon is really good, per usual, I guess, for him, but he's great.
There's a moment at the beginning of the movie where he says something to Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer like tries to correct him, and he goes, "Like I said, like it's suspected communist. I'm a New Deal Democrat. Like I said, suspected communist."
It's great,
so good,
and like I just think this movie has a lot going for it. It's not my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, so again, despite it being second on my list, I'm maybe slightly more down on it than other critics are. Right, and I would probably only be like my like 5th favorite Christopher Nolan movie. right? Which is also among the highest of highest bars, right? And grading curves there, to be fair. But what I think it does so much incredible, and I think particularly like with its visual effects and how essentially all of them were actually done, and there's almost no CGI in the movie, is, I mean, borderline phenomenal and almost like unbelievable. I mean, it is incredible what they do. I think this is a movie that is 3 hours of quiet little moments, which is, as I've talked before about what I love. Yeah, I think it's just like really poetic and beautiful and sad. I mean, we talked about this a couple months ago when it came out. I don't think the movie is as existential as everyone made it out to be.
No.
And as everyone was like kind of complaining they need to like go to their therapist afterwards, I definitely didn't have that sensation. People should see sadder movies. But this definitely didn't do that to me. But it is, I think, a really quiet, powerfully contemplative film, anchored by two great performances in its protagonist and antagonist, and just a really, really, really kind of towering achievement. Cam?
Yeah. Before I throw it to Cam, I'll just say, like, I as the one that didn't see this, it's one of those, like, I have no doubt it's a great movie. I have no doubt it's incredibly beautifully shot. I have no doubt it's filled with incredible performances, much like Asteroid City and stuff.
I don't think you would dislike it or anything.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, I just was never in the mood for an Oppenheimer this year. I'm not looking for 3-hour epic long let's go through all these trials and whatnot, all the political committee and stuff, all those conversations, plus all of the, like, World War II, let's develop the bomb kind of stuff. I was like, I'm just not in that mood. I'm not in that headspace where that was a thing I wanted to see. But I'm like, I'm
fair.
Perfectly happy for, like, all the success it got and all the awards, all the
Love
seemingly
it.
awards, front runner and buzz it's getting and all that stuff. But yeah, it was just one of those, like, just 2023 was, enough of a year that I was like, I don't really need to dive into Oppenheimer. I imagine it will be exactly what I expect it to be. And even that, like, Christopher Nolan I imagine this is a more straightforward Nolan thing.
Very.
I almost guarantee I won't like Tenet.
I guess technically, but yeah, it's not Tenet by any means.
Nothing about Dunkirk really, like, called out to me, and I didn't like. I have
adore Dunkirk.
No interest in really seeing Dunkirk, and this feels like another Dunkirk kind of thing, where it's like, I know technically it's going to be incredible and phenomenal, and performances again great, but nothing really was like, Trevor, you should go see this movie now. So yeah, never got around to it. But Cam, I will let you, as you had not seen it when Logan talked about it on the podcast.
No.
So go ahead and share your thoughts on it.
I saw it a couple weeks ago.
Because it was your number 5.
Yeah, number 5. I got into the movie by TikToks giving me scenes. I was like, I just really want to watch this movie.
I hate society.
Yeah, I know.
I hate the number of times you've said that to me, Cameron. I watched this movie because of TikTok. Or I watched this show because of TikTok.
Hey, you know what?
It's like,
he's consuming TikToks, but he's getting great content out of it.
It convinces me it gives me a tease, and I'm like, you know what? I wasn't going to see it, but now I kind of want to. And that was kind of like, you were like, I was never in the mood for Oppenheimer. I wasn't until I saw clips, and I was like, I want this in greater context, and I want to see this as a film. And I did. And I have to say, this movie has a lot of pacing issues for me.
I don't disagree with that.
It's 3 hours long, but there's a lot of, like, choices that are deliberately made.
Is the issue? Yeah, I think it's just paced weird.
It's paced very weird. There's a better way this could have been paced, and it's because it tries to get existential with the cinematography. I think is where it gets a lot of its time. Like, there's a good, like, probably 8% of this movie that's just transitions that are like probably too long, but are done because of the beauty of the effect. And it's like this, like an interpretation of the splitting of the atom and all this stuff. And granted, like, it does put into context because Oppenheimer was somebody who was visually obsessed with the with the atomic structure of the universe. To the point where, like, he was, like, at one point, like depressed because of it at one point in his life. Like, so I will say this is an incredible adaptation of the biography of Oppenheimer, American Prometheus, I read it. It's truly great. It's one of the best biographies out there. This is a brilliant telling of it and showing it. And I think the way that the choice between in color versus black and white, and it not being respective of time frames so much as it's being respective of that story, the parts of the story being told in black and white are not part of like official records. It's conjecture. The stuff that's in color is stuff that's been documented and recorded and stuff. So it's a fascinating way of being like, it's not because of two timelines that there's some black and white and in color. If it's in black and white, it's from like secondhand accounts or from like conjectured hypothetical conversations. And it's funny because these are the ones that Robert Downey Jr. really shines in. Because he gets to be a very vindictive asshole. It's great. It's a stellar movie filled with like incredible performances from everybody. And it doesn't shy away from the fact that like Oppenheimer was a controversial person. He was a deeply controversial person, and not just in like the 1950s of he like communism and infidelity and other stuff. It's just even by modern standards, he'd be considered controversial because of just the decisions he makes and the like are not always consistent with just like a grounded look at the world. There's but also in like he has like Florence Pugh is in this movie and she's wonderful. But like what happens to her, like historically what happened to the character she plays is horrible. And it's indicative of like mental health at the time as well as mental health for women at the time.
I mean, there's also the story that was making the rounds kind of following this of like the native peoples that were basically disposed of by the project and all that
the
stuff.
Project took land from the Native Americans. There's a lot of stuff about it that is kind of like not talked about, but is mentioned and referenced. They don't shy away from it. It's just not given a focus. But yeah, like it's a whole thing. It's a movie that I think is just really
again,
like
going back to the elemental conversation says a whole lot in and of itself by the stories we tell.
By the stories we tell. And I think that this is a story about a man who like and even with him being a controversial figure, completely was wrong of Strauss and the US government to crucify him after everything. Granted, he made things and he did things to alienate very powerful allies that he initially had. Most importantly, Truman, where he basically told Truman that he feels like he's responsible for all the bombs, and Truman's like, I'm the one that actually told them to drop it. I bear that weight. Fuck you.
Although, that gets into some like, I think the movie's portrayal of Truman is pretty shitty.
It's really shitty. I
think it's a pretty bad like interpretation of Harry
it's a
Truman.
very one-sided interpretation of a relationship, and
maybe
it's
I'm
not
defensive because of Missouri's own Harry Truman, but like, it's also like it's a very, very negative.
The world's most successful hat salesman, Harry Truman.
Yeah, it's a very negative interpretation of Harry Truman.
Yeah,
and a very like arrogant and asshole, and it's like that like rubbed me the wrong way because like I think the movie had handled its characters really well and like really three-dimensionally,
especially with Strauss. Strauss should have been like the big villain and asshole of the movie, but he's handled extremely well.
But he's also three-dimensional. They just kind of give Harry Newman like it'd have been better if that scene just wasn't there, and instead they just kind of make him like this like one-note caricature of a person and not a fully fleshed out three-dimensional human being like everyone else is. And I think it like stands out so much more to me for that reason.
It's a big sticking point for me as well.
Yeah.
Out of all these like very deep, in-depth, like analytical looks at characters,
everyone is given all these like extra layers, except for him.
But I will say the committee scenes in that closed room, all of those scenes are brilliant.
I agree.
Well acted, incredible moments of the film. That I think some of the best acting is done in those small moments.
Again, Emily Blunt in particular.
Emily
like
Blunt
really shining there, just saying no words, just doing so much.
Owning that scene, just looking at the guy asking her questions, and when he starts getting angry at her, she goes, "I'm not answering because you didn't phrase it correctly. Like you phrased this wrong, and I'm not answering that." And it's just like such a pedantic way of like getting under the skin of this guy who is doing this just to like for political purposes only, and just
to embarrass her husband and her.
He's trying to embarrass her and her husband But in return, she's embarrassing him in front of the committee members to the point where one of the committee members, she completely wins over one of the committee members in that scene.
Yeah.
And it pays off at the end because it's like, yeah, there's a lot that goes into this where like it is brilliantly done. It is brilliantly shot. Those scenes are interstitial between other bigger events that happen in the film. But my mind is always drawn back to those small moments. And the fact that this is a Oppenheimer wasn't hung out to dry in a big way in a tribunal in front of Congress. It was in a back room of a government office. And it was kept private and quiet and utterly just dismantled him just for the purpose of a security clearance.
Yeah.
And it's so well, it's a brilliant way. You could also call this like the political assassination of Robert J. Oppenheimer. Like, it is, because that's what it is.
The fact that
by the coward Lewis Strauss.
Yeah, but the
fact that it was done that way deliberately, right? So that he couldn't be made a martyr, for that he couldn't give these speeches in front of the public. And it was. I mean, it's brilliant in how kind of malevolent and diabolical it is, right?
And it's so good. And oh my gosh, the way that it pays in turn with shout out to what's his name? He played Han Solo in Solo.
Alden Ehrenreich.
Alden Ehrenreich. He is such a great character because he's
great.
He plays an audience member to Leo Strauss's downfall, and he's so good in it because he just plays it so well because he's a member of the president's staff who's meant to be shepherding Leo Strauss through his and it just the way that he turns on Leo Strauss throughout the movie is the same way we as audience members are turning against Leon Strauss.
I have to say too,
it's so good.
To Trevor's, I'm sure joy as someone who's been a big Aiden Ehrenreich guy for
Alden Ehrenreich.
Aaron Aldenreich guy for years and years and years. It's like he is so good in this movie, and it gives me a newfound appreciation for him as Han. Like, he's so good in this movie.
Same with Jack Quaid. Jack Quaid is phenomenal. Everyone who you have that has small parts in this movie do it brilliantly. Yep, and it's so well done. Josh from Drake and Josh.
Yeah, I was going to say Josh.
Yes,
I know Josh Peck's in there.
Yep.
I've heard.
He's
David Horowitz.
He's the guy who pushes the bomb.
Yeah, he's the guy who's the demolition technician that is the one that's in charge of making sure the bomb goes off.
Yep.
During their testing. Great. And it's like that iconic scene of them looking through the lens at the bomb going off. He's in that. And it's like, that's such an iconic moment for this. Like, it's a small part. These are such small parts, but the way they're able to deliver them is just so excellent. And it makes up, and also shout out to the guy who played Einstein, because it was awesome.
Oh, dude. The Einstein sequences, there are a couple of them throughout the movie.
Oh my God, so
are all and the way that they almost it's almost like this hazy reverence for Einstein that the film has, understandably so to a degree. Those scenes just have a special energy and static to them. It's just they're magic.
I love that they straight up call
the movie's great.
Yeah, I love how they straight up caught up hey, we can catch up to the Germans in building the bomb. How? Well, the Germans are doing this thing called anti-Semitism, and Hitler thinks particle physics is Jew science.
It's really not working out for him.
Yeah, and so he's not going to give Heisenberg and von Werner the proper things that they need to actually build this bomb. So we have an opportunity with that. Yeah. And it's also another point is that both Strauss and Oppenheimer are Jewish. And it's there's a whole American Prometheus goes into this way deeper into the Jewish connection between these guys, and a lot of Strauss's theoretically a lot of Strauss's anger towards Oppenheimer is that Oppenheimer was able to kind of set himself apart from the public identifying him as a Jew in his celebrity status post-bomb. And there's a lot of people who are Strauss worked very hard to try to both be super Jewish, but also publicly not appear to be sympathetic to the Jewish cause.
Right.
And it's very much a interesting look at jealousy and personal betrayal over professional opinions. It's great. It's a really brilliant film.
Yeah, excellent. Just a quick correction. I said David Horowitz. I meant David Krumholtz. just the guy from Numbers. I know I've
Yes.
seen him pop up in this movie. Josh Hartnett's in it and stuff. Yeah,
It's also from the Santa Claus.
yes, yep.
Also, the
Bernard.
guy who is Polka Dot Man in Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
is-
David Dismouth.
He plays a great role of the dude who writes the letter that says, "I believe that Oppenheimer's a communist spy," or I believe that he is not a communist spy. It's done. The plot to dethrone Oppenheimer is so incredibly well executed. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Like you have to admire that level of like
Again, diabolical. In this,
diabolical levels of just destroying a guy.
Alrighty.
All right.
Cam, hit me
just
with
wanna
your
say-
number 2.
My number
Before we go
2
in-
is
Sorry.
sorry, yeah,
I
no,
was
look.
just say,
You need a
I
break?
really didn't expect it. No, I don't need a break, but I really didn't expect this to be 3 hours. And look at us go.
Oh.
I should have known better.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I expect it to be 3 hours. I'm supposed to go to my
Okay.
folks to pick up some food for the next week, and I told them
Number
it won't be
2.
till like after 6 or maybe even after 7.
All right. Your number 2 then, Cameron.
My number 2, it might be your number 1, Across the Spider-Verse.
That is going to be my number 1. So we will
I
talk about
totally
it
forgot
in
that
a little
movie
bit.
came out this year.
And that was what
God, this year was so. God,
I
2023.
wondered if that was going to be because we're down to I know what Cameron's number 2 and number 1 are. It's just a matter of what the order is there. So yeah, now we will talk finally about my number 2, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Oh yeah.
A movie
What is your
that's
number 1? Oh, your number 1 you said. Okay.
yeah, Spider-Verse will be my number 1, so we'll talk about it in a bit. Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves again.
Two.
Coming off of last week, where Baldur's Gate 3, not only my game of the year, but also my
It's
new
the year
favorite
for
game
Dungeons and Dragons for you,
of all
man.
time.
Yeah.
I've gone so far. I'm making up for lost time on Dungeons and Dragons, but this movie in particular was just such a fun adventure.
Yeah.
Such a fun, good time, and especially I think in a year where, you know, the superhero genre that has been dominating that kind of thing just fell off a cliff in a lot of ways.
Right. Right.
Like this was
Fair.
a movie that could have easily missed, but it didn't. It was
In some
so
ways, should have probably
clearly-
missed. Right.
I mean, it didn't do as well financially as they would have liked. Like, I'm sure it lost
Sure.
money financially, but critically, people loved it, and it was a ton of fun. And so yeah, this is one of those very clearly made by people who absolutely love and adore Dungeons and Dragons. And the cast of this, like, as we often say, like, all of them know exactly what kind of movie they're in and are there for a fun time. Whether it's, you know, the lady screaming Jarnathan, just with such beautiful sincerity. Hugh Grant, who we've talked about earlier, has a ton of fun just being like the conniving, sneaky
Hugh Grant's a
rogue
great bad guy
in this. Chris Pine, you know, anchoring it with a beautiful, like, platonic relationship with Michelle Rodriguez is a ton of fun there. The supporting cast, Renee, what's his butt from Bridgerton, is so
Renee
fun.
Jean-Philippe.
Renee Jean Page, Regé Jean Page. So much fun as the paladin who, you know, comes in for the second act, steals the show, and then leaves.
Look, you don't know this term. It's called a DM NPC, the Dungeon Master's non-playable character, introduced usually to make sure that the player characters will survive things that normally they probably wouldn't survive. Trevor's met a couple of mine.
Sure.
And like it's a critical tool to have, just in case.
I mean, he's there for that a little bit in terms of like the fights and stuff, but so much is more like he's there for the exposition.
Oh, 100%. That's another thing that DM
yeah.
NPCs do is give exposition.
Yeah. But it's like it's so much like Baldur's Gate. It so expertly captures like the feeling of, all right, here's a plan we're gonna do, and we rolled a nat 1, and so the painting is face down, and now we got to deal with that obstacle and figure out what we're gonna do, and so yeah, there's just so much like fanfare about this, and especially if you know like Dungeons and Dragons and you know the spells and stuff, there's plenty of Easter eggs to see there. But even if you don't, there's still plenty there, and that's like again, going back to like the Super Mario Brothers story, like this is the polar opposite in that regard of like there's still at the core a fun, heartfelt adventure story on this that also happens to have just fun buck wild cameos from Bradley Cooper and stuff. And
oh my god, Bradley Cooper showing up is like the best cameo of the year.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's so much fun in this one. This is another one, when Cam and I saw it, we did a big old spoiler cast episode on it, so many of our thoughts are already shared on it. But yeah, this, I think, like when looking back through the year, this was just easily one of my favorites of the year. So
100%. I think the way that it, neither me or Shroff ever played Dungeons and Dragons before, and I think the level of fun and the amount of times we still reference this movie, right? And I genuinely think the scene where Chris Pine's face just slowly like melts basically is in the run between like the funniest scene of the entire year for me, I think, in a movie. Like, it's certainly up there. Like, it's so good, and it's especially because of like how unset up it is, right? And like how unprepared and unexpected that moment is, and you just kind of be like, what is happening? Like it's just so clever, it's so good. This and like the Dimension 20 stuff that I got really into over the summer. It was a fun 1-2 punch, and it's again a little bit like Mario, to make that reference again, is a movie that I'm like, do I like this movie more than I think I did at the time, right? And like, this is a movie that I think I had 7th, right, ultimately.
Yeah.
But like, I could, again, that was back and forth. It was originally 6, and I could have this as high as like 4th and be like, yeah, that would make sense too, right? Like, it's just a movie that I think is just such a good time and is just so much fun. So yeah, it's a great shout out, Trev.
All right. Cam, anything to add from you?
It's just such a phenomenal movie. I think we had like a 2-hour spoiler cast then that kind of contains all my thoughts on it, but overall just an absolute blast to watch. It's by I think what was my number 4. Yeah, number 4. Like it does such an amazing job of capturing the feeling of playing a game. But it gives you
I like that description.
It captures that perfectly. Because you feel like as somebody who's played a lot of D&D, you feel the roles being made. You feel the roles being made. You feel like when it's the druids escape from the fortress, and you're like, mechanically this shouldn't be working, but I have a feeling she's making some hot rolls right now. She's on a hot roll streak going, and so they're playing the rule of cool. She's doing all these wild shapings, normally not allowed, but she's making some sort of like arcana or nature checks going on as she's making this happen, and it's awesome.
I mean, even in and of itself, like that just. Also, one of the most creative and fun action sequences of anything in the movies this year for me was that like long kind of like one shot of her going through all those different animal forms to get away from the town, with the absolute payoff being like, so she did turn into a deer. Yeah. Because Michelle Rodriguez's barbarian character was so excited about that.
Yep. It's just great. The cast of characters feels like players at a table. You have a DM NPC. You have like the BBEG being a former ally that was probably like a former player character at some point. Like it just feels great. It's a beautiful story of like just found family and everybody coming together. To make some incredible things happen, and it does a great way of showing us from the world of D&D what a campaign looks like, and they just execute it fantastically.
Yeah. All right, so that's our number 2s, and so our number 1s, if I am reading the room correctly,
I don't know. Cameron's one.
Logan and Cameron, both of you have Barbie, right?
I thought Cameron already talked about Barbie.
No.
Or was that you that gave Barbie a shout out?
Barbie was my number 4.
Oh, that's right. Yes, mine's Barbie.
Both of you were like,
mine is also Barbie.
Further down the list. Okay.
Yeah,
so I'll spoilers.
We're gonna do
that's going to end up
then.
being our number 1. So yeah, we'll talk about my number 1, Spider-Verse, first. and then we'll circle back to Barbie for both of your number ones. So yeah, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse came out this year. I rewatched it last night just to be like, yeah, this is still my favorite movie of the year. Unsurprisingly, probably, given that I've long been on the record of like I saw the first Spider-Verse movie in theaters 9 times, my favorite movie of all time. This Spider-Verse I saw, I think, 5 or 6 times in theaters. And part of that ended up being fueled by there were like scenes that it was like there's like 2 different versions out there in theaters or something like that. I was like, oh, which one am I seeing? But for me, it was also still very much coming from a place of like finding something new in every viewing and stuff like that, seeing something that I missed before. I don't have Spotify, so I never have a Spotify Wrapped, but easily the music that I listened to the most, if I had that, would have been Guggenheim Assemble. I listened to that song so much, either on YouTube or on in my Amazon music account, because I bought the album. And that's basically the music track in the Guggenheim sequence at the top of the movie. Gwen Stacy's theme is just one of my favorite songs of the year. The music in this, Daniel Pemberton is firing on all cylinders, continuing what he did with his great work in Into the Spider-Verse. And this, much like Dead Reckoning earlier, has very much like this was originally part 1 of 2 parts, and still has a like to be continued kind of thing at the end. So there's very much a, people were resentful about that and thinking like, oh, that's not like, this isn't a full movie. And I argue it is for character growth and character moments. I think Miles has a complete character arc in this movie. I think Gwen has a complete character arc in this movie. And while yes, there's still like a big bad out there looming in the horizon, and a new challenge for our heroes to overcome, it's in that regard no different to me than Empire Strikes Back, where if Star Wars ended at Empire, that would be a very disappointing franchise without Return of the Jedi. So I think this still tells a complete story in and of itself. The art style, just they continue to amp it up. Obviously, a lot of stories came out about the less than stellar working environment following the release of this movie, and so that's disappointing. And I hope that for Beyond the Spider-Verse, things improve and that the team kind of gets the time and care that they need for this one. But yeah, this was just top to bottom. I don't like it as much as Into the Spider-Verse, but it's like easily on it's still, in my overall kind of like tiering, I have it as like a phenomenal, which is our 10 out of 10 kind of movie, and loved my time with it, loved the multiple additional viewings I've had with it since, and it just continues to wow me in terms of like how Sony is handling Miles as a character, how Sony's handling Gwen as a character. Even like Peter B. Parker has fun growth moments in this one. This definitely like steps away from the team from the first movie and really focuses on Miles and Gwen a lot more. But I think there's still like incredible character moments, even for Miles's family, and there's a lot of beautiful stuff there. Just animation continues to fire on all cylinders. The introduction of the Indian Spider-Man, as well as Spider-Punk, Hobie Brown are phenomenal additions to the crew, and I think more than make up for the fact that we lost Spider-Man Noir and we lost Spider-Ham in this one, but the tease at the end of the film that they'll kind of all be back for the next one just leaves me very excited for like the end of this trilogy. And at the pace it's going, at the rate it's going, it has the potential to be my favorite trilogy of all time. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, my number 1 movie of the year. Cam, you had it at number 2. Anything to add?
I think that this film is spectacular in the themes and messages it tries to touch on in regards to what does it mean when you are actually living the legacy. Into the Spider-Verse is so much about what it means to take on the mantle of Spider-Man, and Across the Spider-Verse is what does it mean to the different people who live that mantle, who live with it, who make it their own. It's not just about It's not just about Peter Parker's. You have Miguel O'Hara. You have Gwen. You have a lot of these different people who are not quote unquote Spider-Man Peter Parker, and they all practice being Spider-Man completely different. I think that one of the best things that this film does is it focuses so heavily on Gwen and we see, and it's also what it means to be alone as Spider-Man when you now know that there's others out there. Mm-hmm. Miles' entire dream of what he wants to do in college and study is all based off of the idea of meeting his friends again.
Yeah. He is desperate to become a quantum physicist so he can learn how to get to alternate dimensions.
Yep. That's his goal, is to reunite with his friends, because even after saying goodbye and saving his world, he still misses them. We get a greater context to the ending of Into the Spider-Verse with Gwen showing back up as part of but also what does it mean to want to be part of, learning about something that exists is something that you already wanted, which is a spider society. Finding out that not only the spider society exists, but that all your friends are a part of it, and you desperately want to be attached to it. And what does it mean when you are denied that? Not only that, but you are told that you can't be trusted and you're on the outs of this thing before you even knew that it existed. And what does it mean when, essentially you're forced to be an individual instead of part of this greater unity, of this greater organization? And what does how does Miles react to that reality that he has to live in? And the actions that he has to take place to do what he thinks is right, but everyone else is telling him that it's wrong. Mm-hmm. And his journey in finding that answer is incredibly important to his character. And even though we aren't seeing the kind of full arc of that just yet, because it's kind of it kind of cuts itself off, a la Empire that Strikes Back. Or sorry, The Empire Strikes Back, not Empire that Strikes Back. It's doing it in such a brilliant way of confronting what those choices mean, with him going to a place where he kind of stole. Even he unintentionally received something that was supposed to go to somebody else in this world. And instead he's now confronted with the realities of things being tied to things that were outside of his control that he still is tangentially responsible of.
He didn't steal shit.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say steal.
Yeah.
I meant to, that's why I corrected myself by saying he unintentionally received it. Did not mean steal. My apologies. I didn't mean to do that, to put that out there he stole that. No. He unintentionally received something that was not meant for him.
But yeah, that has larger consequences, and an aspect that is very clearly vocalized by Miguel that he didn't maybe consider as a result of what happened there.
But also Miguel is somebody who is expecting Miles to take responsibility for something that Miguel, deliberately withheld information from getting to Miles about. Yeah. It tells a lot about structures of power and organizations and society, and where are places that can find resistance. And nobody explores that better than in the brief moments we get with Hobie Brown, Spider-Punk, who is just the antithesis of this. And oh my gosh, there's this the amazing moment where he sees everything that's coming, sets up people for success, and then bounces. Is just such a great moment. And it's Daniel Kaluuya voices him. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. It's so incredibly well done. This movie is as good as it can possibly be with what it's trying to do. I also don't think it touches the levels of Into the Spider-Verse, but I think that's a problem with when you do a perfect origin. How do you follow up that perfect origin? And yeah, it's a perfect follow-up to that origin, but it's not I honestly don't think we'll have a full appreciation of Across the Spider-Verse until we get the next film. because I think that will show us what the framing of it needs to be. Like you said, Trevor, serious issues with production of people not doing proper pipeline project work, or sorry, not respecting the project pipeline. Also, massive shout out to Kind of Funny best friend Chris Anka, who designed a lot of the spider suits and is an artist working with Sony on this franchise. He has shared a lot of stuff on social media about behind the scenes stuff, and pointed out the other, for other people like me who got super obsessed with the artwork about this, pointed out the other people who worked on other things, other outfits and stuff.
Yeah.
Massive shout out to having Vulture from Scorpion's Renaissance era Spider-Man verse with the kind of sketch, Da Vinci sketching art style. Bringing that here in this is awesome. Everything they do about the art styles is just so incredible. The designs are so impeccable for this movie. It really is it stands above other animated films this year.
Yeah. All right. So that's Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So I will throw it to you guys as it is your number one to dish on Barbie.
Feel free to start, Logan.
Barbie's my movie of the year. If you had asked me 10 times on January 1st of 2023 if that would be the case, I would have said no every time. I think the movie, you want to talk about a movie that no one thought should exist, right? Here it is, right? A movie about Barbie and Ken dolls, right? Who is this for? Who is excited for this movie, right? And the fact that it ended up being, not just my favorite movie of the year, as important as that is, but lots of people's favorite movies of the year, is that it made $1.5 billion at the box office, that it's gonna get Academy Award nominations for acting and Best Picture, right? It is nothing short, and probably for directing, and for sure for screenplay. It's just an
song.
Insane thing.
It won a Golden Globe for song. It's probably
it is insane that this exists in the way it does. It shouldn't work. This is maybe the ultimate example, after years and years of talking about this, a movie that should not have worked, and yet it so thoroughly does. Barbie is smarter, it's clever, it's funnier, it's more heartfelt, it's more thoughtful than so many movies that try to be all of those things, let alone all of them at the same time, right? It is such a great blend of genres. It's a love letter to 1940s golden age musicals and Technicolor films, and it is
1950s beach movies.
1950s beach movies, Technicolor films, Wizard of Oz, right? There's so much thrown in here from classic golden age Hollywood and Gene Kelly era, Singing in the Rain, and yet it works. It works so well, and Greta Gerwig has firmly established herself as one of the best directors in the business now. Margot Robbie is phenomenal. Ryan Gosling obviously gets a lot of the buzz as Ken. It's just great. America Ferrera is also fantastic, right? As one of the only actual human beings in the movie. I just think there's a level of, for lack of a better word, to kind of take something from technical magic to the film, right? It is this weird concoction that works really well. The fact that all three of us have Barbie in our top 4, 5
it's my number 4
movies is, that's insane. It is our collective number one, right? And yeah, I don't even know what more to say. We talked a lot about it earlier, but Barbie's, I think, is just incredible, and I think how emotionally mature and intelligent it is, how brilliantly it skewers toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, and just the worst shit about men.
Talking all the way through The Godfather.
In a brutally beautifully funny sequence, including shit that was I've talked about The Godfather. Yep. I love The Godfather, right? And it's just it's just so good, right? And even the guitars on the beach scene, right? There's just such a level of emotional intelligence to the film And obviously like the whole like America Ferrera like I'm just tired scene and like speech like instantly became like iconic, right? But like I just think this movie does so well. And like the last big thing that I like want to kind of immediately shout out is that like this is in the running for being Michael Cera's best performance ever, right? Like I think it is like such a brilliant culmination of like 15 years of, or more than that, almost like 20 years from Arrested Development of like him and who he is as a like figure in like pop culture. And like this is such a great subversion of that, I think, and like something that we have to buy into who Michael Cera is, and for him to be like Alan, and for Alan to be the actual best guy of all of them, right? And to be like the embodiment of like the men who are also harmed by like toxic masculinity and the patriarchy. It's just like brilliant, and it's so well done. And yeah, and Cameron, take it away.
I mean, there's hundreds of, or like 500,000 think pieces that already exist about Barbie.
Yeah,
from well documented historic, like, you know, film like writers. Like there's plenty of analysis about this movie, about what it means to society. It definitely is, I think, the biggest movie of the year. I think in the impact of how what it has on film. Not only that, but it did also utilize the entire world's supply of pink paint for a brief period of time before they could produce more of it during a supply chain shortage, like problems going on.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. That's really funny.
It is Greta Gerwig. It is a masterpiece from her. She continues to show that she's one of the best directors in Hollywood. She has been for a while. This is just the proof. This is the final proof of the pudding for people who didn't believe it before. I believed it when I saw Little Women. Other people started before with Lady Bird.
Lady Bird. I've enjoyed all her stuff since Lady Bird.
Yeah. So she is by far one of the best, not only that, but best like writers. Her ability to co-write and write movies and like do reinterpretations of like even classic literature, like with Little Women, is truly incredible. But for me, where this movie hits is where it hit culturally. Everybody was like, I'm this Ken, I'm that Ken. And Trevor knows, before I was like dressing up, I was like, I'm like Beach Ken, I'm like Fat Ken, I'm like this Ken. And then in the movie, as I'm watching it more and more and more, it's like, oh shit, I'm Alan. And not like, oh, like I've also suffered in the picture, but like Alan is queer coded to hell. He is, as somebody who literally was in the closet till I was 30.
Even. Right. Him
saying all of Ken's clothes fit me means something different to me than I think it does for other people. Is like, I hid in plain sight in front of all the other heteros, or in front of all the heteros, and everybody thought Cameron's a little weird, but you know, I wouldn't say he's gay, or I wouldn't say that he's queer. And it just being like, yeah, because all of Ken's clothes fit me, all the patriarchy fits me. I can pretend to be a straight, white, cis, hetero man, like just all of that. I can pretend to be the ideal part of the patriarchy, but in doing so, I hurt myself. In doing so, I'm hurt by it because, one, I'm not being honest about who I am, but also Alan is hurt by it because, yeah, he is Ken's friend. All of his clothes fit him, but he's not a Ken. As much as you can be like a part of the patriarchy, the people who receive all of the benefits of it, you're never going to be one of them.
Yeah.
No matter how bad, no matter how much I dress up, no matter how much I suppress and hide who I really am, I'm never actually going to be the cisgendered white hetero man who receives all the benefits of society, because even if I take advantage of those benefits, I'm not really part of it, and I will always know that. And the only person I hurt by doing that is myself. Alan coming to terms with that, fighting against the patriarchy, not just running away from it, but actually actively fighting against it, joining the efforts about it, speaks a lot to what it means to be, why it's so important for men to be part of feminism, what it means for like why feminism, like we're not in post-feminist society. We are in third wave feminism. We get so many representations of that throughout it, both with Alan and also with America Ferrera and her, the touchstones she brings to it about like really refocusing the lens of feminism on the larger, not cisgendered, not like all of that. It's just so incredibly well done and articulated in a way that does not get in the way of a fun and exciting and awesome movie. You still get the "I'm just Ken." The
Best
kind of
song
like
of the year.
yeah,
100%.
with the end that culminates in a beach battle scene, where it's so much humor. And when you watch like the outtakes and the bloopers of Ryan Gosling just ad-libbing stuff, and it just being the funniest shit. And one of my favorite moments is like a scene that's not in the movie. That's like an ad-lib scene where he and I think he's from Bridgerton or he's from something else. British wise, he's like
Kingsley Benadire.
Yes,
who was
Kingsley
in
Benadire.
Secret Invasion. He was the bad guy in
yes,
Secret
that's
Invasion.
who he was. That's what it was. I've tried to block Secret Invasion from my mind, as we all should. Secret Invasion.
You also have Ncuti Gatwa in there as the new Doctor.
Yes, he
also
is.
as
He's so
another
good.
character.
Oh my god! And he reunites with his sex education friend at the
Emma Mackey,
co-star.
yeah.
So good.
Who's the Margot Robbie? Everyone kept saying they were like twins.
Yeah. And they were in the same movie, and she had to have brunette hair because otherwise they wouldn't look the same. But I will say, there's a scene, an outtake where Ryan Gosling is playing on like a keyboard of Boys Just Want to Have Fun, and the other guy's just like slow dancing to it, just like doing like a shimmy, like a bit of a shimmy and like some dancing to it, and it's one of the funniest fucking things. And it's not in the full movie. Like, there's so many things that are cut out from this, and it's so brilliantly done. Shout out to John Cena's surprise cameo, being the merman awakened by the patriarchy.
All because he was shooting Fast X next door.
Yep.
Basically, it was like, hey, can I be in the movie? And Margot Robbie was like, yeah, sure, come on over.
Yeah, he is. If there's like a part that I can like do a walk-on cameo, and she's like, yeah, not a problem. And so he gets to be paired up with Dua Lipa. So good. Also, just shout out to the choreography. Everything in Barbie Land is so goddamn great. So pitch perfect, so well done. The acting from everybody in this movie is top notch. If the worst actor is a hilarious Will Ferrell as the head of Mattel, if that's like the worst acting in the movie,
I don't even think it is. Like, Will Ferrell is so good in this movie.
I think he's great in this movie. But I think he's like, if I think about acting wise, I think he's probably the weakest one. But that's it. Like, your kid actor's phenomenal. Everyone in this movie is phenomenal. Shout out to also daughter saying, that's culture appropriation, Dad, at the very end. When he says, si se puede, which is also a tie-in to her being from a Disney original movie. America Ferrera getting her start from that, where that's like
it's
the
great too,
tagline.
because like apparently it's like America Ferrera's like real life husband too,
Yeah.
and so it's like an added like
that's
layer
so
of like
cute.
fun. Yeah, and so what I
Shout out to
I
him just
think
being at
too-
home on Duolingo learning Spanish.
Yeah,
So
like
good.
there's like a layer of, I think, added depth to everything, right? Because you talked about like I'm just Ken being too much fun, and it is, but like also like the message and lyrics of that song are like Ken himself learning to like accept himself and love himself, and to like kind of unshackle himself from his like own patriarchal path. Like there's just there's so many like layers and dimensions to everything. So even the most like fun poppy song is actually like way more than just that, right?
Well,
and it's like all
yeah.
them holding their hands and like accepting who they are, and like
It's
just
this
great.
It's this great reconciliation that he brought patriarchy to Barbie Land, and in the end, he has to reconcile the hurt that he's going through is not because of Barbie, but because of his own patriarchy and his own patriarchal experience. It is, I have done this all to myself, and I am the one to blame. And it is a great moment of like self-reconciliation and recognizing that being part of the problem, followed up by completely forgetting it by doing a massive fight on the beach. With Simu Liu, who is phenomenal in this movie as well. Everyone is incredible. It's so good.
Yeah. Just to throw a little bit out there, since this was my number 4. I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I will say the Will Ferrell stuff is the weakest for me, and feels like it is a holdover from a different version of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like anytime we kind of have to do that like diversion to them, pulls me away from the stuff that I really like about this movie. So I wish they weren't in it as much, and Will Ferrell wasn't doing the Will Ferrell thing as much. Like he's fun enough. He's what I expect from a Will Ferrell, role in this. But yeah, just like that, because that it adds this weird like how like it blurs the line of like the real world, versus Mattel versus Barbie world kind of thing. It's like, okay, but if people act this dumb in the real world, then like the parallels there didn't really work for me as well as all of the Barbie world stuff.
He should not have gone to Barbie World. I feel like the corporate executive team should have stopped at failing to capture Barbie.
Yeah.
And that would have been it, because I think the punchline of him being in the movie is Barbie wanting to meet the head of Mattel and finding out the entire board of Mattel is a bunch of men.
Mm-hmm.
That's the punchline of it. We don't need much more. Like chasing her, fine. After that, don't need him anymore.
And I do like the gags that we get of how Ken and the patriarchy are changing Mattel World, and so like them getting the update of
That's
like
fair.
the Mojo Casa or the Mojo Dojo Casa are like flying off the shelves, boss. Well, but no, this is about more than money or whatever. Like I liked those like little check-ins that we got.
That's fair.
But yeah, just by and large, that whole subplot just didn't work for me as well. But yeah, so much of the other stuff of this is just golden. I mean, best production design of the year, with Asteroid City maybe being like a close second there. But yeah, just like every Barbie Land set is phenomenal. Like the like attention to detail and so much of that stuff is just wonderful and delightful. Like like the fact that they like really built a lot of that stuff and just had it kind of on those they used like classic scene design and ideas and stuff to do all of the pathway into the real world. Lots of fun there. Shout out to Kate McKinnon as Weird Barbie.
Yes.
Very much being like the Barbie that my sister when she was 5 kind of ended up creating versus the Barbie she would kind of have and play with later. Helen Mirren, shout out to her as like the narrator and including one of the best jokes in the film of like, note to the producers, if you're trying to make this point, don't cast Margot Robbie. When she's like, I don't feel beautiful anymore or whatever. So yeah, like that was great. There's absolutely a ton of like greatness in this film, but those few things that kind of stuck with me is like, I just don't like how they tie into the film were the things that kind of slipped it up my list a little bit. And it's still down to 4.
All I was going to say, all the way down to 4th, right? 4th, 3rd. So it's like, it's just a great movie.
And ultimately it's like, it's just that the other 3 resonated with me so much more than that. Yeah. But yeah, like
this one's bad.
I like as we were getting to it and being like, okay, yeah, Barbie is there, everything, everywhere, all at once. This year, I was like, I don't see a fault with that. I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, there is also that whole like the wild cultural phenomenon that like this became. Because Barbenheimer happened without knowing if the movie was going to be good or not.
Accurate, yes. Accurate.
Barbenheimer still would have happened even if the movie was crap, just because of like a happenstance of, hey, these 2 movies are going to launch on the same day. And the fact that it was as good as it was is a testament to Greta Gerwig, to Noah Baumbach, and the whole team behind that one. Because they did an amazing job, and the fact that it was as good as it was led to a lot of like repeat viewings and people going back and
such a fun. It felt like the most fun, enjoyable experience in a theater I've had since the pandemic, probably. And just like how like pandemonium it was and packed it was, and just like it was such an event.
It's the hardest we've ever had finding a parking spot at.
Oh my god, we had to park so far.
Theaters,
we had to park so far away. We had to park in the bank that was on the opposite end, like outside of the parking area that we normally park in.
We were at the Wendy's. We parked
that's
at
right.
the Wendy's.
We couldn't even park at the bank. We had to go to the Wendy's.
It felt like it was an event in a way that nothing had been since Endgame, and it was just. Yeah, it was great. I someone who loves movies and loves movie theaters and wants them to exist. It was awesome, and like it is just like a phenomenal summer movie that I can just watch again and again.
All right, any final thoughts before I dive into our overall sites top 10?
Go through them.
Alrighty. So across the three of us,
There you
just
go.
little stats. We had 18 different movies across our top tens.
That's pretty good. Okay.
So the 8 that don't make the cut are the Super Mario Brothers movie, The Archies, Evil Dead Rise, Fremont, Wish, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, Rocky Rani, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Is our just outside our top 10. So our number 10 with 7 points from Logan, Asteroid City. Tied at number 8, we have our collective number 3s, both mine and Logan's, with Suzume and Air. Number 7, with some racking up some points from both Cameron and myself, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. Number 6.
I'm gonna watch it tonight. I'm gonna do it.
Number 6, Wonka, with some points again from Cameron and me. Our first, with all three of us getting points on the board here, Elemental at number 5. Then we have Oppenheimer at number 4 with 15 points among the two of you. Number 3, driven largely by my number 1, but also with Cameron's number 2 there. 19 points for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Number 2, with points from all three of us, matching my list, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Just ahead of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And then the blowaway number 1, Barbie, with 27 out of possible 30 points among the three of us.
Another repeat,
number
like you
1.
said, of everything everywhere all at once.
Yep. Well, Everything Everywhere at Once was 29,
29
points.
That's true. That was 29
last
points.
year.
Yeah.
But even still, 20. This one by what, 7 points, Trevor? It was still a blowout.
Yep.
It was less. It was more competitive last year, even though it had more points than this year.
Yep. So yeah, I like the image that people have been looking at largely on the screen has been, as I mentioned to you guys beforehand,
Margot Robbie's face.
Margot Robbie surrounded by Oppenheimer, and the very distorted Chris Pine face that you mentioned when we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Yeah.
And then I did in that image, I also have Elemental. So like when we were talking about that, I slid that over a little bit. But yeah, outside of those, the only one not included, not factored in that, being Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in our top 5 there. But yes, Barbie is our number 1 movie of the year for 2023, mirroring obviously the box office for 2023, where that one just blew everything out of the water, and yeah, amazed everybody beyond all expectations. So shout outs to that indeed. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you everybody for joining me for another long one, as these top 10s / honorable mentions often are. We came in a little bit under the game of the year compared to that one. We're sitting at about 15 minutes under right now, but depending on how the outro goes,
we can get there. We can get there.
so let's go around our metaphorical table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabbage, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, folks can look forward to my anime list of 2023 later. Probably end of this week. Towards the end of this week, I'll have it ready for you. For all of you out there, if you want to know what I thought about anime this year, that's where that is. That's my non-game of the year, non-movie of the year list, compared to Trevor's 12 of those lists.
There you go. Are you also have a write-up for a movie of the year, right?
Yeah, I have a write-up for movie.
So
of the year.
yes,
So
you'll have one of those coming up as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. You follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Logggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
Hey, hi. I hope you had a wonderful holidays. We were gone for a little bit, and I missed you. And now it's a new year, 2024. It's gonna be the GOAT year. Exciting things are happening. Look forward to all of them.
Is it Year of the Ram?
I don't
know about that. I know I'm getting married this year. That's exciting.
There you go.
You should all stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
It's officially that year.
That's
Trevor.
absolutely a shout-out worthy thing. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. As I said, kind of at the top of the show, all those hours ago. We do have plenty of other lists going up on the site, but yes, also coinciding with this, Cameron will have his movie of the year, his breakdown of those movies. I'll have mine. If Logan ever sits down to write his out, I'm sure we'll go ahead and post that as well. But yeah, go check out all of the other lists that have gone up. I also still, at some point, I'm going to have like a best actual plays list of 2023 for me. And then in terms of other stuff, we'll probably be back with That D Plus show this week. We took some time on that one off. So we'll sit down and figure out what we want to chat about on that. I'm thinking the Doctor Who specials.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that'll be some fun stuff to do. But we also have like the What If season 2 out there. There's Percy Jackson for fans of that it's out there. So yeah, plenty of options here to kick off 2024 in our That D Plus sphere of things. And then next week's episode won't be like a best of ranking list, but we'll probably kind of do a catch-all for other best of things, like best shows that, best TV shows we liked. Cameron can kind of spout about some of his best anime and stuff. I'll talk about, some of my best actual plays, favorite YouTube videos, whatever other things we're not going to have like full-blown lists and rankings for. We'll discuss in next week's episode. So stay tuned for that. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us, including kind of the full rundown of all of those best of 2023 lists. If you liked what you heard, once again, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. As always, thank you for listening. Stay nerdy, be good to each other, and you are Knuff.